Are you ready for the second virtual DIY Summit? 3, 2, 1, let's go! Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for the second virtual DIY Summit 2022, the premier online event for the home improvement industry. Discover the latest trends in DIY, meet top managers from our industry, shape the future of home improvement, network with leaders of our industry. And now, please welcome our Summit moderator, John W. Herbert.
Well, we're ready to go, and welcome to this, our second virtual DIY Summit. My name is John Herbert, and I'm the General Secretary of EDRA, the European DIY Retail Association, and of GIN, the Global Home Improvement Network. Together, we've got 219 stores throughout the world, operating in 75 countries with over 33,000 stores, and the members' sales are in excess of 300 billion euro. I would like to welcome all our EDRA GIN members from all around the world, wherever you may be, and from our partner association, the HEMA, the Home Improvement Manufacturers Association, and to all those delegates who are watching in, who are with us in our recent global DIY summits, the physical ones. Well, we're expecting a record attendance to follow this webinar today. Our people in South America and Canada, they won't be watching live, they'll still be in bed, I think. But the whole of Europe, Iceland people are coming, South Africa, we're going to Japan. In Japan, it's 5 o'clock in Tokyo, it's 6 o'clock in Melbourne in Australia, and it's 8 o'clock in New Zealand. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in all my life, I can say that I've never known the world in such a turmoil as it is today. We have a global pandemic. We have a war in Europe. We have problems with the climate change. The earth is getting warmer and warmer. We have high inflation, and there's soaring costs on energy. But we in the home improvement branch, in the pandemic, we've done fairly well. Although we're not proud of it, but the home improvement industry has seen a boost. So let me show you now the sales figures and the development of the home improvement industry in the past years. It's coming. Here we are. So you see we're still in an industry that is expanding. And we can be very proud to see the way that the growth has been. But the last 2 years in the pandemic, we have seen an explosion. And even in 2002, we are expecting less sales than in the last 2 years, but they will be significantly higher, generally speaking, than they were in 2019. So we have, as people, I think, have rediscovered their homes. So let us look at the market size here now of the home improvement industry. Here we've got North America with 460 billion. It just shows you the enormous strength and the might of America. The sales are twice as high in North America than they are in the whole of Europe. And then we've got the Asian Pacific with 64 billion. And we've got then the Latin America, 11.7, and Africa, and then Asia. So these are the world markets, and still, as I said earlier, increasing. So what are the top 10 companies in the world? Again, the Home Depot with an enormous 135 billion. Gosh. Then we have Lowe's, the number 2, with 86 billion. It is still true, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And then we go to the other biggest markets of Germany. Then we go to the other stores now. Let us start. Home Depot is number 1, Lowe's is number 2. Then we have Adeo in France, operating in many European countries, 25 billion. Kingfisher with 15.4 billion. Then we go to Maynards in America with 10 billion. Bunnings of Australia, 10.9 billion. and Sodimac 5.7 billion, Obi, of course, 7.2 billion. So these are the top 10 players in the world. Well, I did mention that the world is in a situation that we've never experienced before. But now we have the second virtual DIY summit. I'm sure for the next 3 hours, let's forget our worries, because I hope with the program that our team have put together in the Global DIY Summit, which I consider to be absolutely excellent, I hope that at the end of this webinar, you're going to feel a little better and a little bit more inspired than what you do already. So now it is the good tradition that we invite the presidents of the EDRA GIN, Sergio Giroldi, and the president of HEMA, the Home Improvement Manufacturers Association, Reinhard Wolf, to say a word of welcome. Please welcome the EDRA and the HEMA presidents. Thank you.
And now, President's Welcome with Sergio Giroldi, President of EDRA GIN and CEO of Obi, and Reinhard Wolf, President of HEMA and Managing Partner of Wolfcraft.
Good morning, good afternoon. For some of you, even good evening. A warm welcome also from my side, from EDRA, from GIN, to this second virtual DIY summit. John was just talking about one of the terrible things which happened to our generation, this bloody pandemic. Terrible, really terrible. But something that we have learned out of that is that we can meet more often, we can meet more frequently, simply using biotechnology. And the meaning of this DIY summit is exactly that, finding new ways to meet each other more frequently, more often, in order, hopefully, to discuss more about the challenges that we have in front of us. So what I wish for the future of the association, for the future of EDRA, GIN, but also HEMA, is that we find other opportunity of meeting each other, talking about specific problems on ad hoc events, on ad hoc meetings, in order, again, to continue improving our service to our customers. What we have in front of us is undoubtedly a very challenging period. And unfortunately, this will last longer. My opinion is even much longer than expected. You also read the newspaper. You are also informed about what happened in front of us. So you are perfectly aware that we just were about leaving a period of crisis, and then we had to go through a terrible pandemic, and then we had, unfortunately, to face this terrible war. So crisis, in some cases even recession, unemployment, which stand in front of us, lower disposable income, digital transformation, new generation, and many other challenges they are in front of us. And I'm strongly convinced, today more than yesterday, that only putting under common factor all the effort that each one of us as individual, as company, as an association, only putting under common factor, we will find the best solution in order to bring our branch, retailing and manufacture, ahead, continue stop on people's mind and continue serving better than before our people. So cooperation among producer and retailer and producer is still today, as I said, even more than yesterday, essential for our future and for continue serving one of our purposes, one part of our corporate social responsibility, to stay closer to people and to improve people quality of us. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day with us. Reinhard, your turn.
Thank you, Sergio. Welcome from my side too to the second Global DIY Virtual Summit. As John and Sergio said already, we are in a difficult situation today. The digitalization is a known trend. This year we saw that climate change is having an effect. We have the COVID pandemic since 2.5 years, and since 6 months we have the war in Ukraine. We are in a multiple crisis situation. And this leads in problems in the supply chain. Containers are not in the harbors they should be. In front of the harbors you see long lines of ships who cannot unload the containers. We have shortage of raw material. We have an increase in price of raw material not seen since decades. Many, many challenges for us. And what will we face in the near future? And I agree to Sergio, it will not end soon. There may be shortage of goods. There may be a further increase in the energy cost. And the end consumer will be very uncertain about the money he has in his pocket and the future. And these problems will not go away soon. And this is a challenge for our market. But, and I think John said that in a very good way, the DIY market is still strong and it still has a good future. Even in times like this, DIY is needed. Maybe even more than ever before. So we have to solve the problems. We have to create the future together by working together, and as Sergio said, industry and retail together, and it is worth it. The market is there. It's a lot to change, a lot to do, but it will help us increase the market. And having a conference like this today is just another step into this development, in that direction. Sergio, you will retire at the end of the month, after more than 20 years as CEO of OBI and 5 years as president of EDRA and GIN. As president of EDRA and me president of HEMA, we had some time together. We discussed the situation of our market, we discussed about future trends, we discussed about what does that mean for retailers and industry. And this kind of discussion were always very inspiring for me. As CEO of OBI, you run and was in charge of one of the largest retailers in the DIY world. But at the same time, you invested your energy, your time to care for the total market. And you worked hard to improve not only OBI, but the total industry of DIY. I think this is a very honorable work you did. But beside these activities, as what we would call in the Ruhr Valley a captain of industry, I had the opportunity to see other parts of your personality. A family person who never missed to spend the weekend in Italy. Only once, as you said, and that was due to COVID. But I experienced a person too who was touched and empathic about what happened to other people close to him. Sergio, you're a warm and empathic person. I enjoyed opening the conferences together with you. We showed that retail and industry can work together, and I think we set the tone for the whole conference and maybe about this too. So, Sergio, thank you for all the open discussions we had, for cooperation during all the years together. Enjoy the exciting years, which for sure will come, and I almost start missing you. You said it before, it was a great journey. Thank you very much. And now let the conference start.
And now, Global Political and Economic Outlook with Michael Gramp, Chief Economist and Research Director, Deloitte.
Well, we are now ready for our very first presentation. And I'm delighted to say that our speaker spoke in Berlin 5 years ago on the same subject he is talking about today. We've mentioned the media, how we've all felt quite depressed of what is going on in the world, particularly today. But in Berlin, after I heard this presentation, I felt much better. I hope I'm going to do so today. The theme is the global political and economic outlook. And we are delighted to welcome the Chief Economist and Research Director of Deloitte in Switzerland. Please welcome Michael Gramp. Thank you.
Many thanks for the introduction and the invitation to the DIY Summit, and a warm welcome to all participants around the globe from Zurich in Switzerland. It was 2017 when I last presented at the DIY Summit, then live in Berlin. And if you look at economic developments, 5 years is not a long period of time. But if you recall the major issues we discussed back then, it almost seems like a different time. Topics I spoke about at the time included Trump in the White House, what next? Brexit and the consequences. Record low interest rates, money printing by the national banks, and the threat of inflation. Could we have imagined then that a few years later we would have a worldwide pandemic? Could we have imagined that governments would ban office workers from going to the office? That even in liberal countries, personal liberties and the right to work would be massively restricted? Or that we will have war in Europe? The simple answer is no. But that's what happened. And of course, we feel all these events massively in the economic development of the last few years and in the present. And all of those risks and uncertainties dominate the current economic outlook. And that brings me to the topics of my presentation. In the next 20 minutes, we look at expected economic growth forecasts. We do a deep dive on inflation and labor shortage. And finally, a positive outlook for the global growth of the middle class, especially important for the DIY industry. Let's start with the growth prospects, more precisely GDP forecast for selected countries and regions. The selection of the newspaper headlines already shows that the situation is quite difficult. In 2020, it is very easy to see the very strong declines caused by the government lockdown measures. However, we also know that there have been very different developments from industry to industry. The DIY industry came through the crisis relatively well in countries where shopping was allowed despite the lockdowns. Nick Steen from Euromonitor will later present you more industry-specific details. And as a consequence, in 2021, when there was an easing of lockdown measures, there was a correspondingly strong recovery. It is noteworthy that in 2021, the euro area was not able to make up for its 2020 decline. Not surprisingly, detailed analysis show that countries in particular with very long and strict lockdown measures, such as Germany, have not yet reached the pre-crisis level again. Hardly that we had a strong recovery in 2021, we experienced another slump in the current year. Reasons are manifold, but two dominate. So continued problems in the supply chains, especially in Asia, and of course the war in the Ukraine with the various effects on energy supply, inflation, food supply, just to name a few. China is also a big concern. You always have to be a bit careful with numbers from or for China, but nevertheless, the expected growth rates for China are extremely low. Zero growth is even expected for this source. But other analysts are only marginally more optimistic about China. One of the reasons for this stagnation is the zero-COVID strategy, which is being adhered to with all its consequences. And the uncertainty around the Taiwan question will add to the uncertainty in the future. In general, analysts are cautiously optimistic for the next year and 2024, as you can see here on the right side of the slide. A recession is currently not expected for the year as a whole. However, a short technical recession, so that means 2 quarters with negative growth rates, is quite possible. However, the underlying assumptions are that the central banks will get inflation under control and that there will be no further escalation of geopolitical conflict. So the hope for a soft landing, how we call it. In my opinion, it is questionable whether this will actually really happen, so the figures seem a bit too optimistic to me. Let's have on the next slide a look at the current consumer sentiment. This is particularly important for representatives of your industry. How willing are consumers to spend? Deloitte conducts monthly consumer sentiment surveys. You can find the results online, so a really highly recommended reading. And on the left of the slide, you can see the assessment of the consumers surveyed with regard to their financial situation and how this should develop over the next 3 years. And as of July 22, that's where we got the results from, the pattern continues as well. So consumers in Europe are relatively pessimistic, Brazil and China are relatively optimistic, and the US and Australia quite mixed. But compared with the figures from February 22 that we do not have here on the slide, all are now less optimistic to different degrees. Concerns about price increases are high in almost all countries. That's something you see here on the right side, and this is not a surprise, as we will see later on that subject. Let's go on to the outlook in the United States. Here you can see a long-term chart of US consumer sentiment. And marked in gray are the periods when there was a recession. By US standards, consumer sentiment is currently at a very low level, similar to the level we had during the financial crisis 2008-2009. Despite all still strong labor market with low unemployment rates, it shows that the high inflation and a looming recession depresses the mood. Let's go now to the European Union, and that's a chart you have seen in the last DIY summit as well. And as you can see here in a comparison over time, things look also quite bleak in the EU. So we are almost at the lowest we have seen since COVID. And also if you go back to 2000 on this chart, you see we have never been so low in terms of consumer sentiment in the EU. So China, unfortunately, there is no reliable data for consumer sentiment in China, but a few critical points noted here. I've already mentioned the negative effects of the zero-COVID strategy, and the Chinese government is desperately trying to stimulate consumption. And the central bank recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, cut interest rates. And what counteracts this is, of course, a very high youth unemployment rate of almost 20%. So this is really a very high number. And the strong economic slowdown in Europe and the weakening of the US economy will also affect Chinese producers. Let's come to what is probably the greatest economic challenge at the moment, inflation. And that's beautiful presented here on this slide with these headlines from selected newspapers. We have had asset price inflation in many countries for years. There are many reasons for this. I could talk about it for an hour. But a major driver, however, was the ultra-expensive monetary policy of the central banks. The first time on a large scale was during the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. The central banks thus bought time for politicians to carry out political reforms. But this had hardly been done, and it's also more convenient when the national banks pull the chestnuts out of the fire. The stimulation of the economy through low interest rates then led to sharply rising asset prices. So real estate and stock markets in particular benefited. In Europe, we then had the euro crisis, and again the money press was fired up like there was no tomorrow. The national debt continued to rise, and political reforms failed to materialize in many countries or were not even done. And then came the pandemic, and again governments massively increased government spending, while at the same time ultra-loose monetary policy continued. However, inflation was still only seen in asset prices. The big question was, when will price increases spill over into consumer prices? The question was not if, it was when. And then the post-COVID recovery came, and off we went. We suddenly had a very strong increase in demand, but a supply side that could not be ramped up so quickly in many areas. Supply chain problems and low transport capacities were added, and also a shortage of workers. The perfect storm. So all in all, more demand than supply, and this resulted in price increases. It started in the second half of 21. Nice to see on this chart as well. And at the beginning of this year, the war in Ukraine started, and this led to sudden price increases, especially for energy and raw materials, on top of the ones we already had before. And this explains quite simply the numbers we expect for this year. As you can see, for the next years, analysts expect that rates will come down. In the US, we might have seen the inflation peak already, but still many question marks around those forecasts. A few details. What drives inflation? As already mentioned, particularly strong electricity, gas, transport costs, food and beverage. You can see that on the left side on the slide. Then we also have commodity prices. And the next slides, here you can see the figures shows the very high fluctuation in prices. But there are also raw materials that have fallen in price. As an example here, palladium. Therefore, it depends a lot for a country how dependent it is against which raw materials. Gas is the best example. Just look to the UK and the big impact high gas prices have there, or to Germany. A major danger of inflation is that it very quickly translates into higher wages. Then a so-called wage price spiral would develop, as higher wages again lead to higher prices and so on. So wage price spirals are very difficult to break once they started. As we already have them in the US, you can see that on this chart, the average wage also increases with a slight time lag, as you can see. Interesting, by the way, is that we see the biggest wage increases in rather low-paid sectors. Clerks in retail stores, warehouse workers, truck drivers, and so on. We do not see a wage price spiral on average in Europe yet, as the majority of wage discussion between the industry and labor unions start end of the year, but it will be just a question of time until we see stronger wage increases in Europe. So labor unions are getting ready to fight for higher wages, and we will see them. Now, every economist knows that inflation can be combated very effectively by raising interest rates. Did central banks do this in time? Question mark? Well, no. They woke up very late and noticed their wrong forecasts. So the Fed is still the most active in rising rates at the moment. The ECB is still lagging behind, driven by the fear that a strong rate increase is highly indebted countries could put too much strain on the cohesion of the Eurozone. However, this historical chart shows very well how small the increase in policy rates has been compared to the past. So what is the current outlook? Hope dominates the forecasts. In some categories, you can see that the inflation peak has probably been reached. But much depends now on the military actions in the Ukraine. So should peace of any kind emerge, it will certainly lead to falls in the price of energy, raw material and food quite soon. Rate hikes, so interest rate hikes, will slow economic growth and also contribute to lower inflation. However, it is an illusion that we will very quickly see such low inflation rates as in the last 10 years. So on average 3 to 4% in the Eurozone, for example, is quite realistic for a longer time. So the next topic, and I'm pretty sure most of you are struggling with this challenge right now, labor shortage. As we can see from this chart, labor shortage is almost a global phenomenon. Results are from a recent study by the Manpower Group, by the way, and we see a steady increase in labor shortages over the past 10 to 15 years. Nowadays, very often there is a lack of employees across all industries and also at every qualification level, and that's quite new. So in some cases, however, there is also a lack of employees with very specific skills. And unsurprisingly, as you can see on the next slide here, unemployment rates are at a record low levels in many countries. Here as an example, Australia, UK, the US and Europe. An important driver is the demographic development. So in particular, the proportion of the population of working age is declining continuously in many countries. More people leave the labor market than enter it. Good to see here on the left side in the chart. What can you do about it? Well, to be honest, not much. So, certain countries still have reserve that one could try to activate to increase the proportion of women in the active workforce, for example, or the possibility of keeping older employees longer in the work process. However, this would require very drastic legal changes, for example, increasing the retirement age. However, since there are more and more people who would be directly affected by such changes, this is very difficult to implement politically, especially in democratic countries. So pensioners are the largest voting group in many countries already. So you can calculate for yourself the probability that such reforms will be implemented soon. Immigration is also an option to increase the national workforce, but politically a very sensitive topic with a lot of potential for conflict. My last topic before I finish my presentation, also to end with an optimistic outlook for your industry, the rise of the global middle class. With all the doomsday scenarios that have often been staged in the media in recent years, it is worthwhile to think outside the box on the consumer side. And the most important group of the consumer goods and retail industry globally is the middle class, also known as the consumer class, depending a little bit on the definition. And this group gets bigger every year. So these are your target customers. So this group does not grow exactly every year, as you can see from the chart on the left side, but with the exception of the 2 COVID years, it is really growing very steadily. Incidentally, World Data Lab, so our source here, defines middle class as follows: daily expenses between $11 and $110. So anyone spending $11 or more per day counts towards the so-called consumer class. And in the current year, every second person in the world will belong to the consumer class. So 4 billion consumers out of a total population of around 8 billion. By 2030, there will be 5 billion in the consumer class out of a population of 8.5 billion. The quotient drops to 1.7. And the biggest increase, by the way, is expected in Africa and South Asia. And this sharp increase influences, of course, where goods are produced and sold. It influences labor markets and costs, the environment, and many other things. Let's have a quick look at 2 specific countries, China and India. China is the largest middle-class market in the world, and China's middle class is expected to grow by almost 6% to over 1.2 billion people by 2030. However, China's population will peak soon, and there's the risk of a decoupling. So if we see a decoupling between the US and China, Europe must also decide which side to stand on, and even global companies will then have to decide which side to stay on. So China as a large market to operate in may then no longer be an option for many Western firms. India will become the most populous country already next year with a middle class population of almost 400 million people. So regarding the middle class, still a lot room to improve. But until 2030, the Indian middle class population is expected to double and reach over 800 million people. So there is substantial momentum in India. And on my last slide, you see this Indian growth story very well compared with other countries. So on the chart, you see growth markets, very interesting in terms of middle class as well, like Nigeria, Pakistan, and Indonesia, for example. To summarize, it can be said that the economic prospects are currently being presented in the media in a very negative light. But we all know that the media acts strongly according to the principle bad news or high attention and click rates. But development is very seldom as bad as the media would like us to believe. However, near-term growth prospects are gloomy in many countries, as I just showed you in my presentation. There is no denying that. The many geopolitical risks and the serious inflation situation and its consequences rightly give cause for caution. Therefore, it is even more important that companies must think and plan in scenarios. But they have often succeeded in doing this in the recent years, despite all the crises we went through. The corporate sector is more robust, resilient, and adaptable than many think, and this is a very important positive message. The greatest danger, therefore, comes from overarching and interventionist governments that believe they have the best solutions to the major challenges. and who also believe that this can be implemented in a planned economy style. So observing government action in the markets in which your company operates is therefore one of your most important strategic tasks. Many thanks for your attention. You can find my contact details here. Feel free to contact me if you have further questions. I wish you an exciting and inspiring conference.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael, for this presentation. And it's always a pleasure to listen to what you have to say. I think when I've heard you like last time, you put the world in a better perspective than we see it because of all that we read in the media. So thank you very much indeed for this excellent presentation today. And we wish you all the very best for the future. And thank you very much indeed for giving this presentation today. Thank you very much indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to probably one of the most important topics affecting us today. It is climate change. Climate change is the biggest threat to humanity today. And every one of us, individuals and companies, must do all we can to protect the planet. We must do to protect the planet. Yeah. So, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay. So, but now we have the keynote presentation today, and it is, you heard this morning, our president of Edrogen, Sergio Giroldi, will be leaving this year. So we did ask him if he would give a final presentation before he goes. And of course he agreed, and I think we're all listening to his farewell message to us all. May I please welcome the Edrogen president and the group CEO of OBI, Sergio Giroldi.
And now, the future challenges of the home improvement industry. A keynote session with Sergio Giroldi, president of Edrogen and CEO of OBI.
So, again, good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, good evening. Thanks for joining us today. What I love to do in a few minutes today to share with you is my understanding of the future challenges that we have in front of us within the home improvement industry. Of course, the time we have, as I said, is quite limited. I think that the challenges we have in front of us today are much more numerous than we were used to in the past. We have much more challenging than we never ever had in the recent past. And we are coming, and they are coming, from an exceptional situation which we have never experienced. All in all, my understanding is that we are living in times of shocks. Time of shocks of the economy. We just read day before yesterday that the inflation in Europe has reached 9.1%. And believe me, I do not remember something like this, at least in the last 4 decades. We are in time of shock of cultural and social life. Just keep in mind that out of a crisis, we were entering together with the crisis into a pandemic, and at the end of the day, an unneeded war was coming on top, creating for the whole globe a big unexpected shock. Our generation, they are not used to do. We have never experienced something like this in the past. And all these kind of negative events impacting the whole globe, they have changed the world. And they are continuing, permanently changing the world. They have changed and still changing habits. They have changed and still changing behavior, core beliefs of human beings, of people, and they have also changed the ranking of people priorities. You know, I was just listening to The Economist, excellent speech before me, and I understand because today making a kind of prediction of possible development is very difficult, if not impossible. But of course, in our industry, both in retailing and manufacturing, we need economic prediction, because economic prediction at the end of the day are the one driving consumption, and consumption are the one making home improvement business successful or less successful. But at the end of the day, what I've realized, what I have honestly to agree today, is that we need to get used to this uncertainty. And just listening to what the chief economist of before me was just saying, it came to my mind a book that I read a long time ago, right before, and I was really lucky, the subprime crisis in 2008. A book from a US professor, a US economist, Harry Dent, and the title of the book was The Great Depression Ahead of Us. And I have to honestly to say that reading this book was very inspiring for me, very useful, because by taking some of the recommendation out of this book, for us at Obi, it was somehow easier to prevent the negative effect of the 2008 subprime crisis on our business. But then I perfectly remember, and therefore I was checking this book a couple of days ago, that on that book there was also some mid to long-term prediction. And now I really quote what Mr. Dent was writing at that time. The next broad-based global bull market will be from 2020, 2023 into 2035, 2036. And then is a proven proof that long-term prediction in economy are difficult or even almost impossible, because what Mr. Dent honestly could not imagine at that time was the pandemic, the war, the speculation. And even at that time, each one of us was talking about the globalization. And today, after a few years, we are already talking about de-globalizing our economy. And continuing, I still remember 10, 12, 15 years ago, everybody was considering e-com taking over at least 50% of our business in a few years. You are my witness, it did not happen. And then there was a chief economist of a German bank predicting that Praktiker would have been the winner on the German and European market. Praktiker, unfortunately, was disappearing from the market. So therefore, today we better talk and share some thought about challenges. Because at the end of the day, I strongly believe that challenges, taking care of challenges, is anyway the first step into, if not predicting, but taking care and preparing for the future. As I said, there are really a lot challenges in front of us. Some they are the same, some they are completely new and therefore more difficult to deal with. What I was trying to do in order to make our job easier, I was trying somehow to cluster all those challenges, not all of them, some of those challenges, although I know that it's difficult because some are also affecting different clusters, but just to have a kind of scheme on which we can all together start making some thought, reflecting, and hopefully find appropriate solution, taking appropriate decision. The first cluster, I call it lower disposable income. It's a matter of fact our customer, all customers, wherever they are, in the coming near future, they will be confronted with a lower disposable income because of the crisis, or in some cases, let's be honest, even because a recession. For the first time, I read a couple of weeks ago on a German newspaper an article talking about recession in Germany, or in some other continent like US, if not crisis, at least turbulence. And even China. You see that even China, because of this general situation, is underperforming. The second point, the second challenge is to cope with inflation. Let's call it, in this case, I would say 9.1%, let's call it even hyperinflation, something never seen in the last 40 years. And you know that inflation, if not properly managed, is a real risk, of course for manufacturer, but for retailer as well. And then the energy cost affecting us, operating our business, affecting our customer. We are confronted with costs which are multiplied by factor 2 or factor 3. This is really, without an action from government, is something that will be difficult for each and everyone to cope with. And then the other point, which really belongs to the lower disposable income, is the unemployment rate. And even strong economies like Germany, but also other economies on the globe, they are already today confronted with a growing unemployment rate, because a lot of companies, because of energy costs, because of shrinking consumption, they cannot sustain their business model. So lower disposable income, all in all, making people having less money to spend, and then being forced to spend the money primarily on basic needs, and at the end of the day, changing priorities. I've just seen a market research a few days or a few weeks ago, where was clearly showing that during the pandemic time, home improvement for customer was ranked number 3. Today, home improvement is ranked at number 7 position. And this undoubtedly means something to us, producer, retailer, because it means that people are forced to make choices which are more close to their immediate necessity: food, clothing, shelter. But this is something that it will definitely affect our business in the future. The second cluster, which I call, is the cultural shock. The cultural shock which was produced by pandemic. We have never seen something like this in our life, our generation. They have never experienced that. And the virulence of this virus, but the effect of the virus, was coming on stage immediately, thanks to the faster way of communicating, new media, and so on and so forth. And we are still dealing with the consequence of this pandemic, and then this unexpected, unwanted, a crazy war was coming on stage. And again, our generation, they have never experienced a war so close, few kilometers away from our borders, and with the risk that this will sooner or later also affect our countries. And then, due to that, and this is really goes beyond my understanding, but my opinion is that there will be a general reset of the overall global balance. I strongly believe that continents, governments, they will find a new balance, and this will definitely change the picture, today's picture. And the consequence of that is create uncertainty on the future. All in all, the consequence making people concerned. From one side, our customer hesitating. On the other side, manufacturer reducing investment because they are afraid about future potential and possible development, and retailing, at the end of the day, the last chain before customer losing sales and margin for a sizable amount of money. What I said before, I strongly believe, I'm really convinced that this situation will last, unfortunately, much longer than expected. Cluster number 3 is the business model redesign. Digital. Digital was just jumping and changing the picture, the game, or any kind of business, of any kind of life. And my assumption is that digital is right at the beginning of changing all what concerns our life, in terms of business and in terms of private life. And my understanding is that e-com, which was celebrated 10 years ago as the frontier of digital, is just a minor part of the digital revolution. Digital is and will be much more than e-com. The digital impact on our life, as again, business and private life, will be much bigger than we assume today. Then we have the new generation coming on stage. Our customer base is rapidly changing. New generation who are less affine to DIY, who have different ranking of priorities, who have a different understanding of quality of life. New generation are coming on stage, and they will then force us, whether we like it or not, to redesign our business model. And last but not least, from DIY retailer, we have to move, and hopefully we are already moving to home improvement solution provider. Just to serve in a digital way the new generation, being less affine with DIY. And then just a self-critics to myself, because I strongly believe that the third virtual Congress should then be labeled and named not a DIY summit, but a home improvement summit. Because also in this field, we need to give a clear sign to our associates, to companies, to customers, to all the world which is around us, that we have understood that the direction has to be significantly different. And then I have a cluster which I call the common factors. The common factors which are challenges, but going through all other clusters. The one is speed, so everything has to go faster. Changes have to happen sooner than later. And then the challenge of technology. As I said before, digital, social media, globalization of information will then go through all our activity. The third one is agility. Because of speed and because of cost structure, we need to become more agile. More agile, becoming more efficient, more effective, with all the consequences of that. But in order then to gain speed and to become more agile, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we also need to become more radical in designing our strategy, more radical in implementing our strategy, more radical in taking decision, because this is what speed and agility they are calling for. And at this point, even more than before, the other common factor is coming on stage. And the other common factor which was missing is people. We are all talking about people first. But most of the time, this is just an announcement. We need to learn that without practicing that, each and every day, in all parts of our business, we will not be able to serve at best our customer and to stay on top of their preference, on top of their priorities. And therefore, we need to invest in order to better listen and understand what customers they are asking us. We have even to invest more than before on entertaining customers, on establishing strong, permanent, even daily relationship with customers. And on that, therefore, we need to become much better in managing our social media approach. So we need to use new technologies in order to talk the new way to the new generation. But again, to do that, we need also to make another effort on people. We need to go deeper in understanding the real value of our own associates, of our own employees, of our own people living each and every day into our stores and permanently in touch with people. And therefore, we need to invest more than we have done before in supporting, training, developing, and giving confidence to our people into the store. But all in all, I believe that the most important change we have in front of us is, and I was talking about that in our Congress in Copenhagen, is affordability. Affordability, from my point of view, my understanding, is the answer that the today's customers are demanding from us. They have lower disposable income. There are today plenty of concerns regarding their future. They have already changed their ranking of priorities because they are forced to do that by, as I said, the lower disposable income. Well, from one side. On the other side, I feel the duty as a retailer to continue playing our role when it comes to corporate social responsibility. Our, let's say, a bit beside, but nevertheless important business role. Our social mission, which is an intrinsic part of retailing, give customers the opportunity to improve their quality of life. And therefore, as a consequence, we have to offer them the possibility to continue improve their houses, to improve their quality of life at affordable conditions, at affordable prices. And we have learned during the pandemic that we are a basic need for people. And this is even strengthening my understanding of our social role. And this, as I said before, can only be possible if we are able to improve collaboration among retailers and manufacturers. Not in conflict, this challenge with sustainability, but at least I strongly believe, I'm strongly convinced that is at least as urgent as sustainability. And again, I'm strongly convinced that this is possible only having a closer collaboration between manufacturer and retailer. 6, time to changes is vital. Time to changes is vital, and therefore we need definitely to increase speed, agility. We use in order to prepare plan, to define strategy, to prepare plan, and to implement our plan. I take back I quote a sentence from Laurent Bacall, saying, standing still is the fastest way of moving backwards in a rapidly changing world. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I did my job if I was able to share with you exactly that. Don't stand still, be agile, be faster. Thanks for listening.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sergio. Mr. President, for this very thoughtful, it gives us a lot to think about, the way the future is going to do. You've just heard about the future challenges from the Edrogen President on the home improvement industry in the future. So, thank you very much indeed. But now I would just like to say we heard this morning from the president of HEMA, Reinhard Wolf, that you will be retiring this year. Well, you'll be retiring in September. And I would just like to say thank you. Thank you from the entire industry for all you've done for Edra Gin these past 6 years. You've always been there to support us when necessary. I think about when the problems came with the COVID-19, we soon scanned the world to see what was happening. We communicated that. And you were always there at our webinars when we were learning about what they were doing in Australia with curbside collection, for example, and all the other efforts that people were making around the world. You gave us amazing support. And I also say thank you from behalf of the Global DIY Summit team for really, again, giving us massive support. Obi had the most representatives at the Congress. You supported us. You were there. You also were the very first president that agreed to do a CEO's interview with me, which now has turned out to be a very popular services. I consider myself very fortunate to have had you as the president of Edra Gin for the last 6 years. I can't thank you enough for the support that you have given us, and I know I speak for the entire home improvement industry when I say after being 20 years as CEO of a large company, who can say that today? It's amazing. To say that we wish you a very long, a very happy, and a very healthy retirement. So probably, as you are the president, maybe you should have the last word.
Thanks, John. I think that I can summarize everything in one sentence. It was a long journey, but it was really a pleasant, happy journey with you, with all other colleagues, with Reinhard, with whom we immediately got in contact from meeting number one. As you said, it was a long journey, but now it's time that the new generation are planning, designing, planning, and implementing the future of the DIY industry. Thank you for your collaboration. Thank you for what you have done also for Edra and Gin. And I'm pretty much sure that success to this trip will continue for the future.
Thank you very much indeed. And you're going to go to heaven, but not the heaven that you may think about. I'm thinking about Lake Como, that wonderful area in Italy where you'll be retiring back to. So all the very best, and thank you again.
Thank you,
from the bottom of our heart. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are coming to climate change, which is the biggest threat to humanity today. We've been looking to see what our members have been doing, the members of Edra, Gin, and the members of HEMA, to see what they're doing in climate change. And Oliver Ginestier, our publications manager, really scanned the internet. And what we found that our members, generally speaking, are doing much more than we ever anticipated. Sometimes I think we should have communicated this more, because I think it's got an advantage against some of our competitors in other areas, without naming them, that don't have the same spirit towards sustainability that we have. So we scanned the internet and we found retail companies, and today we have 2 retail companies and 2 supplier companies chosen, and we called them, we contacted them and said, can we please have your sustainability experts come along and join us in a discussion, in a panel discussion today at the virtual Global DIY Summit. So they're here now, and we look forward to meeting them.
And now, sustainability in the home improvement sector, trend or reality? Please welcome the panelists. Hedda Marie Hauser, Vice President, Program Office and Sustainability, Gardena. Jonna Gurun Christian Stostech, Sustainability expert and certified BREEAM associate, Bicro. Sonia Rand, head of sustainability, Bunnings Group. And Job Kunin, senior program manager sustainability, AkzoNobel.
Well, welcome all four of you. I was going to say good morning, but to Sonia, I've got to say good evening to you in Australia, but to all the others, a very, very good morning to you. And we did a bit of a dress rehearsal yesterday, so we know what to do today. And it's really very, very nice to welcome you all today. As I mentioned, that you are the experts in the sustainability. We're so fortunate to have you there today. We've only got 25, I think we're a bit behind time, so we maybe squeeze 30 minutes in instead of 25. It really doesn't give the time it deserves, but it will whet the appetites, and I think it'll give people, it'll spurn people. It is only the kickoff. What we, as an association and a Global DIY Summit, we are really going to concentrate on sustainability issues, because climate change and everything to do with it is the biggest threat to humanity today. So I'd like to kick off this session by asking you all one question. What is your company doing for sustainability, and what initiatives are you proud most of? So we've got 3 ladies and 1 man, so I'm not going to say ladies first this time. Job, you start.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. My name is Job Kunin, of course, working for AkzoNobel, a large paints and coatings company. You might know us, maybe not of the company name, but particularly of our DIY brands, the decorative paints brands, Dulux, Coral, Nurche, Flexa. And I think, John, first of all, I would like to thank you, for putting sustainability on the agenda of the DIY Global Summit. It is definitely a topic where we see we can progress things by working together. So actually, being on this platform, being able to work, of course, between manufacturers and retailers is key, and achieving some of our ambitions. And I also would like to mention something. I think Mr. Maillard just mentioned it, the home improvement sector actually is really important, in achieving some of the sustainability targets for society. Around 39% of global warming, or let's say carbon footprint, actually is coming from the built environment. So also helping consumers doing their home improvement actually will help, of course, making the built environment more sustainable. Now, AkzoNobel, I'm going to talk a bit about AkzoNobel, and our sustainability ambitions and programs. Sustainability has for many decades been anchored in what we do as a company. It's one of our key values. We have set recently also new sustainability targets, which are probably some of the most ambitious in our paints and coatings industry. We have basically 4 key targets currently around sustainability. One of them is a carbon footprint reduction of 50% by 2030 for not only scope 1 and 2, but also scope 3. And I'll talk a bit about that later. 50% of our portfolio being made up of sustainable solutions, products that actually bring clear sustainability benefits for our customers. Then thirdly, we want to make sure that in our own operations, more than 100% of our waste is actually circular. And the last ambition that we have set is around the training and empowering skills of more than 100,000 people who work in our communities. Now, I wanted to today focus a bit more about, of course, our carbon footprint reduction target. That is a game changer in our industry, because that is where we have set, as a first paints and coatings company, an ambition to reduce also the carbon footprint in our scope 3, so upstream and downstream. And that is quite an ambitious target. And for that, we have realized less than 2% of our carbon footprint comes from our own operations. So more than 98% of our carbon footprint actually comes from either our upstream activities or our downstream activities. And that is why it is so important to work on collaboration. Collaboration, when we talk about the programs that AkzoNobel is running, then we are working together with our key suppliers, our top 200 suppliers, and making them aware of the carbon footprint that they have. And also then the programs that they can work on themselves to actually reduce their carbon footprint. For that, it is really important that they don't only work on their own carbon footprint, but they actually reach out to their suppliers, so the suppliers of our suppliers. And then secondly, of course, downstream, we're working a lot, of course, with our customers, trying to engage them actually in using more sustainable solutions and also in certain processes to reduce the carbon footprint as such. For that, we work a lot about, of course, innovation in our product portfolio, but also innovation in how we work together. And we use our Paint the Future platform for that. And one of the recent activities we've started is the Paint the Future Collaborative Sustainability Challenge, in which we bring together partners from our upstream and downstream together to tackle some of our key barriers and challenges we have in the industry in reducing together the carbon footprint. We do that also particularly with some of our home improvement retail customers. That's where we try to work together on portfolio management and of course on communicating properly also right to consumers, helping them making the right choices for more sustainable solutions. So that's what I wanted to share briefly with you, John.
Okay, well, thank you, John. Margot. Quite a lot there to hear. So let's now go to Gardena, to Hede Marie Heuser. So, yeah, let us know what you're doing for the sustainability and the initiatives you're most proud of.
Thank you very much, John. And as Job mentioned, I think it's really great to see that sustainability is on the agenda. And a pleasure to present a little bit what we can do as suppliers, especially being active in the area of green spaces, to also support the CO2 climate change activities. So Gardena is belonging to the Husqvarna Group as one of the three divisions, and the Husqvarna Group started in 2015, which is so-called Sustainavate program, the sustainability strategy. The first cycle started in 2015, the second one in 2020, and now the 2025 targets are built on three pillars. It's the pillar of carbon, of circularity, and as Mr. Tiroli said before, for sure we cannot miss the pillar of people. In people, the target is to empower 5 million people by 2025 to take a sustainable choice. We as Gardena, we want to use our recognition and the trust of consumers in our brand by giving advice and inspiration for sustainable gardening, but also by offering products in sense of sustainable choices. These sustainable choices could be a circular innovation, as we have in our circular pillar, the target to launch by 2025, 50 circular innovations. And these circular innovations are innovations that should care for reducing waste as much as possible, reduce the need of material as much as possible, keeping products and solution really long in the life cycle, and if there is the end of the life cycle, ensure that it's possible to recycle the material again. We just newly launched the EcoLine range, the first garden tool range in the market with a high degree of recycled material. And we are very proud about the fact that more than 65% of the plastic we use for these products are coming from household waste, without compromising on the durability and the longevity of these products, which is very important for us. And we are also proud that we could win the German Sustainability Award for this product range. These sustainable choices are for sure important also around the entire topic of water, the use of water. Without water, there is no green garden. There is no nature. So we as Gardena, we feel responsible to ensure that we offer to our consumers high modern irrigation technology, allowing to avoid any waste of water in the garden. We do this like with the help of micro drip system, for example, really making sure that the water comes directly to the root of the plant. But additionally, modern technique, we talked about digitalization before. Modern technique also helps by sensors and by controllers to save water. So with our smart controllers, we could, for example, last summer, save up to 330 million liters of waters, corresponding to approximately 130 swimming pools of Olympic sizes. So quite important. Because we think water, as I said before, really is important and every drop counts. And for sure, we also work on the carbon challenge. As Husqvarna Group, the target is by 2025 to reduce our emissions by 35%. We are very happy that mid of this year, we already reached 31%. And as the Gardena division, we even could distribute by reducing our emissions then more by 60%, which normally should lead to the fact, okay, then why don't you increase your ambition level? Well, the fact is that we have a high ambition level working on absolute CO2 emissions, and we are happy to have growth in our company. That means, well, keeping this level and reaching then the 35% will be nevertheless a challenge and not a walk through the park, especially as we not only measure our carbon emissions of scope 1 and 2, but we also, like Job said before, we also add elements of the scope 3. We add our suppliers' emissions, we add the emissions caused by transport of our products, at least the ones we pay for and therefore can control. But the biggest part of our footprint is emissions caused by the use of our products. So that means that we calculate CO2 emissions on a projected lifetime of these products. And as mentioned before, if we sell more, it means that it automatically decreases. So the ambition is really nevertheless to reduce. Husqvarna already joined in 2016 science-based targeting as the first listed company in Sweden at that time, showing that we really take our sustainable ambition seriously and that we want to really strive and support limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Well, hope I could in this very, very short time confirm that we take it really serious and that we want to make a difference. Thank you.
You do indeed, Hilde Maria. You really do make a difference. And I've always been very impressed with the Gardena innovation on the products and particularly on the sustainability issues. So you've just heard the two presentations from the suppliers. And so now we come to the retailers and we're going all the way to Iceland, where we've got Jona, who's going to tell us again what her company is doing for sustainability, and I know they're doing a lot, and what you are most proud of. So, Jona, you start.
Thank you, John, and good morning from Iceland. I've been with BICO for 6 years now, and for the past 2 years, I've focused on sustainability regarding our product range, as well as creating knowledge on certification systems for buildings. I've specialized in the Nordic Swan, BREEAM, and LEED certification systems. So I'll be covering sustainability at BICO, how we're affecting community and other stakeholders, and what's happening in Iceland and how we're a part of the development. My main focus is to analyze our product range in cooperation with product managers to see how much of the products we are offering are sustainable and either influence our suppliers to move towards sustainability or to find a compatible product that we can offer to our customers. We want to influence our customers to build and renovate with sustainability always in mind. But how? By making these products and relevant documents and consultations on our website. And we're also internet is teasing me. We've also been offering consultation to all parties. Our focus has been on the professional side because that's a big part of a business, but we also realize we need to act towards the individuals, for example, homeowners, and our next step is to make the products more visible in store, educate and influence those customers to choose sustainable products and we realize that's really important. Last year, BICO signed a climate declaration with the city of Reykjavik and FESTA, Center for Sustainability. So we have fully committed to achieving measurable results regarding the climate change. Some of the things we've done internally is that we have implemented the UN Sustainable Development Goals throughout all our activities as a tool to help us change the way we think and work. We focus on 5 main goals that best suit our business, but keep others in mind as well. We are actively measuring all our emission, energy use, waste, and water use, for example, and if we see irregularities, on the live dashboard we act on it. So we have also exchanged most of our car and equipment fleet to electrical and all lighting to LED, as well as reducing paper use and focus on digitalization. We've been in forestry for over 30 years and had the forest scientifically measured last year to find out how much it's binding of CO2. And that's around 1,200 tons a year for the next 10 years. Just to put that in perspective, our own emission from scope 1, 2, and flights of the staff is around 300 tons a year. But when we count in scope 3, we reach about 4,000 tons. So we have a lot of work to do yet. And that's our next big project, is to analyze scope 3 and see where we can make changes in order to further reduce emission from our activities. One thing we started this year also is to harvest all plastic from our operation and send it over to an Icelandic company that take the plastic and make a product out of it. First product we made was a flower pot we had on our 60th birthday this year, where we let all our customers plant a summer flower in a pot to take home with them. So just to teach the public a little bit about the circular economic. Next product is also already in design stages, so that will be interesting to see what we make next of our plastic. We're also in the preparing phase to get chain of custody certification for BICO. That would mean that all timber products we import and sell will have traceability from harvest to end user. Really important step for our customers that are building sustainable and certified buildings. And the most important thing is in gaining more understanding and knowledge is the collaboration with customers building sustainably. And we also take active part in innovative projects we have taken part in SWAN certified new buildings and refurbishments and are currently collaborating on a big educational project aiming to compare the Nordic SWAN and the BREEAM certifications for new buildings. We've also supported the development for a new Icelandic database for sustainable products launching this fall in October. So by being active participants in all kinds of projects and innovation, we can all learn from each other, and we should not be afraid to collaborate and try out new things. That's how we learn and evolve. So another thing that keeps us motivated and brings us knowledge is active communications with all stakeholders, whether it's the government or our customers or suppliers. The Icelandic government has published a roadmap for sustainable building structures, action plan with 74 actions to be achieved by 2030, aiming for 43% reduction in CO2 emission from the building sector here in Iceland. So we've been active participants in the work groups regarding this project, and we'll keep on providing our vision into this work going forward. We've also been hosting meetings and presentations for contractors, designers, architects, engineers, associations, and schools to spread our knowledge.
I think you've gone. Jona, we can't hear you anymore. So let me just carry on at the moment. May I first of all say that we followed the BICO, and what we've done, we've been very impressed with what you're doing on sustainability issues. But we've been equally impressed the way you communicated. You mentioned the stockholders knowing about it. I think your PR, I was speaking to somebody from Iceland and I said BICO and they said, oh, they're very good on sustainability issues. And I think that is very good. And not only that, you come from the most beautiful country. The light of the vision that I saw in Reykjavik was just simply amazing. So you've been a little bit disturbed, but thank you very much indeed. I hope we get back to you in a moment. So now we come to our second retailer that really knows no introduction. It's one of the world's largest home improvement companies. They're by far the #1 in Australia, #2 in New Zealand, and doing an amazing amount for the community, and particularly on sustainability issues. So here we have Sonia Rand.
It's my pleasure to join you tonight from Melbourne, Australia. So at Bunnings, we're Australia and New Zealand's leading retailer of home improvement and lifestyle products. And we're also a major supplier to project builders, commercial tradespeople, and the housing industry. We're very committed to reducing our environmental impacts and also have a really long-standing commitment to supporting our communities where we operate. So at Bunnings, we recognise that business in general has a really important part to play in reducing carbon emissions and addressing climate change as a whole. So we have in place targets to achieve 100% renewable electricity by 2025 and also net zero on our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030. So we divide our efforts into 3 main parts in this climate and energy space. There's energy efficiency initiatives, there's the on-site generation of renewable electricity, and also the purchase of renewable electricity from large-scale projects. So I'll speak first around our energy efficiency initiatives. We have a constant effort and project to upgrade our store network with energy efficient LED lighting. So currently our network has 67% has been retrofitted, and it's a standard inclusion in all of our new store builds that we build going forward. And for on-site generation of renewable electricity, it's all about solar. We're very, very blessed here in Australia. We have an abundance of sunshine. And so we continue to invest in this technology, and we have nearly 100 of our sites with solar PV installed on the roofs. So when we add those efforts in energy efficiency and installation of solar on our roofs, together with the signing of long-term renewable power purchase agreements, we have over 50% of our network now powered by renewable electricity. And in New Zealand, we have 100% renewable electricity powering the network there. So I'll move over to our community efforts. It's another area where we're very proud of, and it's always been at the heart of everything that we do at Bunnings. Our team members live and work and raise their families in the communities in which we operate, and we really love supporting local communities. It's a very important part of who we are. So we engage with these local communities through fundraising opportunities. We have our community sausage sizzle. We provide product and gift card donations, and also do a lot of hands-on DIY support. So things like painting and gardening makeovers. And every one of our stores has an individual called an activities organizer, and they're responsible for leading this engagement. They're a key team member in our team. For those who have been to Bunnings, you may have experienced the Bunnings sausage sizzle. It's become a very iconic feature of the experience of shopping with Bunnings. And for more than 25 years, it's provided really a local and simple way for community groups to raise vital funds for their important work. We've seen the effects of COVID-19 on our community activities, and whilst they had a significant impact over that time, our teams have still rallied together to help raise and contribute more than $29 million last year and participate in more than 54,000 community activities. And one really important example of our community program in action was in response to the devastating floods that we had in Australia in early 2022. So our teams came together to run a national sausage sizzle, again for fundraising, and we raised over $500,000 towards those efforts. The last area I'll speak to today is around our responsible sourcing of timber. We're a leading retailer in this space, and so our goal is to ensure that all the timber and wood products that we buy and sell originate from legal and well-managed forests. We've got a responsible timber sourcing policy in place, and it requires that any timber or forest products that we buy from natural forests are certified. So they're certified to either FSC or PEFC standards or an equivalent standard. And we also conduct a very regular timber survey to all of our suppliers. And we look at elements such as timber species, country of harvest, the forest type from where the timber comes from, and also the country of manufacture of products, along with certifications and any product claims that those timber or wood products have. We know that there's still a lot to do in the sustainability space, and we're very excited about the opportunities that lie ahead for us. And we're looking forward to working with suppliers and other retailers like those on the panel here today to work towards the future. Thank you, John.
I think we've heard today 4 accounts, 2 from 2 suppliers and 2 retailers, dedicated, passionate. And one good thing about having a Global DIY Summit is that I believe you heard so many gems of information, you can stream these later. So I would recommend to all the suppliers and the retailers just to listen what has been said, to just compare. You may be doing more or less, but I'm sure that you will be quite inspired when you really go in detail. Well, we only had 25 minutes and it's almost exhausted. But let's just have one question, just to give a little taste of what we can do in the future, because as I mentioned, we are really going to very seriously look at these issues in close detail and to give support and help and advice to all our members throughout the world. So let us just start with a quick question, probably only one we've got time for. So, Heda Marie, you start.
Yeah, we talk a lot about collaboration, and Job, you mentioned that suppliers are playing an important role also in our field. And we see challenges to collaborate here and get data and really exchange on a very honest and open way. So I wonder, you seem to have overcome these obstacles. What could we learn from you?
Yeah, good question, Annie-Marie, I would say. It definitely is a challenge also for us, right? As a paints and coatings company, I confirm a large part of our carbon footprint sits in our upstream value chain, so with our suppliers, and actually not only with our suppliers, but also with the suppliers of our suppliers. Currently, AkzoNobel, we are using industry generic data for our carbon footprint from the regular databases like EcoInvent and others, right? To have carbon footprint data available for the raw materials that we use in our paints and coatings. And we are working together at this moment with an organization called Together for Sustainability to actually identify and create the methodology in which our industry will use in the future supplier-specific carbon footprint data. You can imagine if we are buying a particular raw material from 2 or 3 different suppliers, and one of those suppliers is, of course, undertaking particular actions to reduce their carbon footprint. That is something, of course, we want to recognize and use, of course, in our own data.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. That's how quick, 25 minutes. I think we even had 5 minutes longer. But I think this was just a taste of the future. We're really going to deal with this issue as much more closely in the future. We'll allocate a lot more time, and we'll certainly invite our speakers. All the 4 speakers, as you could see, are very, very dedicated and very passionate for the environment. In fact, they put together a final statement that from the 4 of them that I'd like to read to you now, just as a message to leave this very important subject of sustainability and climate change. A real impact and progress can only be made if both parties, retailers and suppliers, contribute to the different challenges and opportunities, such as logistic programs, new products and marketing activities, promotions, in-store activities, and communication campaign. All have to accept it could be a very bumpy road, but this should not prevent us from implementing joint projects as they are contributing to our joint future. DIY industry, retailers and suppliers have already proven in the past that important changes like ECR, digitalization, online, can be successfully managed with a fair share of cost and profit and should be seen as a good example how to handle the sustainability issues. That is even more important for the sake of the people and for the planet. Sustainability is not only the most important DIY trend of our times, but also the most relevant, and an important area where we really can contribute to something that's most vital to human mankind. Call to action: all companies should give their teams the freedom without standard profit pressure to implement projects. Together, we can make it happen. Let's do it. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking our 4 panelists. As I say, very sorry that the time has so shot by that we couldn't have more questions, but I think that the message you came over very, very well indeed. And so now, like every Congress, we go to physical. We're going to also have on the virtual a little break for about 15 minutes and come back to us, enjoy a nice cup of tea or a coffee or send an email, telephone, whatever, and enjoy the break. So thank you for joining us this morning and look forward to seeing you in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Jetzt gibt's den Biber-Bonus, jetzt gibt's den Biber-Bonus, jetzt gibt's den Biber-Bonus. Holt ihr den Bonus?
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for the second Virtual DIY Summit 2022, the premier online event for the home improvement industry. Discover the latest trends in DIY, meet top managers from our industry, shape the future of home improvement, network with leaders of our industry. And now, please welcome our summit moderator, John W. Herbert.
Well, welcome back again to the second part of our second virtual Global DIY Summit. I hope you very much enjoyed the 3 presentations that we've had this morning or today, and we're now going to have another 3 presentations coming. So let us start. Today, speaking to you now is the Global Head of Home and Garden of Euromonitor. Euromonitor is the world's largest provider of global business intelligence, market analysis, and customers' insight. Be talking about trends, be talking about our consumers. Let's give a warm welcome to Nick Steen.
And now, DIY in 2022. Decision-making when instability is the only constant. With Nick Steen, Senior Industry Manager, Global Head of Home and Garden, Euromonitor.
John. I'm talking today in support of decision making and the mission of seeing what is going on in a time of instability. Today, even after overcoming so much in the last 2 years, the foundations of some of our business models are still shaking. And some issues, especially on the supply side, are yet to be resolved with no end in sight. Many of the pressures we coped with in the last year continue to grow, and there are new stress points opening up, especially in Europe, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That we need to be making good decisions is painfully obvious. How to see a positive way forward through this fog is less obvious. In service to that, my theme and the material today is all about pragmatism. We need a bit of clarity. Where are we? What is slipping and where? What is staying solid so far and where? I want to share as many pragmatic metrics as I can for what we can see in motion and where possible show how fast things are moving. To build a picture that's both relevant and timely, we need to get a bit creative, both in how we use the data that's out there, but also in embracing some of the innovative technologies that measure the world in new ways. This is an aspect of research that I am very keen on. In terms of the material I'm going to cover today, so let's jump to just testing the clicker. There we go. Wonderful. So I've got some recent growth and inflation numbers for the sector. I've got some examples of how companies are coping in this period. I'm going to share some numbers on spending in context of total retail, building on what Michael was talking about earlier. And in context of retail, it's useful for benchmarking. I want to highlight some novel metrics on the scale of the dialogue in climate change and circularity and the promises that are being made so far. There's a consumer appliance brand on an interesting journey in China that I need to make sure is on your radar. And as long as I'm not overrunning by that point, I have a parting thought I would like to share on inflation. So jumping straight in, some 2022 numbers. For this section, I'm using a mix of national statistics sources and weighting those for sales or weighting them for production and export as appropriate. This includes index measures for growth and also measures of inflation sat in the consumer retail prices with CPI measures. Near future inflationary pressure is also implied from the current production output using the PPI. And we can also have a look at the production planning level a little bit, looking into the wider view and fluctuations in commodity prices. I'm going to use this chart format a few times. It's worth a little bit of an explanation. The bars are from the retail sales index data. 2021 is the 100 baseline for the index, and the data's had inflation stripped out of it. So this is only showing constant real terms. Each chart is highlighting how far ahead that particular data set was ahead of pre-COVID 2019. And each chart shows the sales growth rate for the periods and the matching inflation rate inside of the data. So if we look at home improvement overall, and if anyone's interested in the reading copy of this, there'll be definitions for all of the data sets. So stripping inflation out, home improvement in the first half of this year is 3% up in real terms. Q1 was 10% up. Europe's been driving that. Europe specifically was up 46%, while all the other regions had a very small single-digit growth rate. The spike in Europe's about annualizing the lockdown disruption that was in Germany and the UK, particularly in Q1 of 2021. When we look at Q2, that's declined 5 points, and the drivers around that, the Americas and Australia have been holding steady so far, but we're seeing Q2 declines in Asia throughout the quarter, and we're seeing in Europe a decline that kicks in by June. And I'm going to come back to both of those shortly in context of spending data for benchmarking. If we look at tools, I break tools out specifically. There's data for certain country sets that get into more granularity. Tools is a possible breakout for North America and parts of Europe. This is the cleanest data point I've got for what's happening with the new DIYers who've joined the sector. If we look at Q2, North America is so far maintaining the 2021 residual bump that increased the market size from the DIY learners. And the activity in that so far to June is at the same level as 2021. And that's keeping in mind that 2021 for the US particularly was already down on the peak of DIYers active in 2020. The issue in the numbers is coming from Germany, Italy, and UK, where tools get broken out. And cumulatively, they are down 15 points in the quarter, but collapsing 22 points in the month of June. And this drop is in excess of what we're seeing for total spend on home improvement. So it's a clear indication the flow of new DIYers has stopped. And in June, the market size for active DIYers is actually back, best case scenario, to 2019 levels. Possibly we are starting to see a decrease in replenishment and replacement of broken machines. So that goes even further. Obi and Wolfcraft shared their initiatives in Germany in this event last year for nurturing DIY and gardening projects for those new DIYers to the sector. We've seen since similar programs to Obi's Machbar with this rise in-store skill workshops, and similar also to Wolfcraft's DIY products aimed at learners with anxieties. And we've now seen new products arriving in the market in Japan, China, Argentina, and Brazil. And the approach and the thinking behind this is spreading. In Europe, we think the tools growth and the new DIYers arriving might well be a spent trend, but we still see the rise in interest and investment in this in other parts of the world. The clicker's catching up. There we go. Turning to gardening, the indicators are up 1 point in the first half. A lot of the data sets for gardening are focused more around horticulture than they are around the equipment, but there are some equipment indicators. Q1 is 3 points up. But when we get into Q2, we see the beginnings of a decline. This is entirely about Europe. All other regions are holding flat or showing modest growth. The demand in Europe has softened, and the retail indicators were 6 points down in the quarter and 9 points down by June. That's halving the gains that Europe made during the pandemic, with the new gardeners entering in both 2020 and 2021. So, I'm going to touch on commodity pricing, but this chart of pain is one I think we're all too familiar with. I'm not going to linger here for too long. On the two slides that are coming, I'm talking about pricing strategy, and I'm oversimplifying it to a fairly shocking degree. I'm looking at some variables in isolation, knowing that they are part of a bigger and more complex system. But the point around highlighting it is the decision making and the priorities that are attached to passing cost on. Before I get into that, the main factors I am pushing aside for the moment relate to shipping, currency, and labor. You can see shipping heading off the chart back in Q2 2020. That needs a 600 scale index to track it through the last 2 years. It's still currently set at around ×4 from pre-COVID times. The shipping hurt one of the product areas I'm going to touch on more than it did the other. So I know this situation is more complicated, but it's still interesting to view it like this anyway, to see this gap in behavior. First up is furniture. So this is based on the published materials exposure of a world top 10 leader in furniture and furnishings. More than 70% of their materials exposure is to wood and pulp. If we look at Q2 versus the previous quarter, Q1, that mix of materials at commodity level creates an average 2-point cost pressure on furniture makers, and that's passing smoothly through. You can see it in the PPI, you can see it in the CPI. It's passed through into the market very smoothly. And then when we look at Q2 year on year, again, the same pattern. From early in 2021, all material cost changes are being ritually passed on very quickly through the chain, and it's reaching consumer prices. If we then jump and look at the wider picture since the beginning of COVID and the influences of this, we get to see a different pattern. And of the 37 points that were created in terms of material cost pressure, 20 points of that has been passed on, most of that in the last 12 months. 46% of the total cost was absorbed in the early stages, and a small amount in the margins is visible, but mostly it's been offset around cost reduction actions. And once the waves of cost became visible early part of 2021, everything gets passed on. Let's compare that to an example from tools. This is looking at the materials exposure of a leader in tools and garden equipment. That's a 60% exposure to metals, especially steel, and that means a larger cost pressure overall and more cost pressure at each of the stages. Clearly, this has been handled with a different approach. There's a lot more evidence around cost-saving activity with tools, particularly in the middle of a boom, the ability to optimize factories and get scale benefits out of having completely full factories. That's evident too. This looks like a plan for temporarily accepting a reduced margin in the middle of a very large global competitive boom, and that's serving the priority of market share over the priority of pushing cost on immediately. And if we look at Q2, the cost pipeline looks like it contains about 10 points of residual pressure. And that means that instead of pushing larger price increases through over the last 12 months, this pressure's in the system. And demand, particularly in Europe, we can see is starting to turn soft for tools. So this pressure suggests tool makers are facing quite a strong test in the second half and into the beginning of next year on their ability to pass costs forward into retail. And you can see the gap in behavior and the gap in decision-making and priorities. There's a number of background things that are helpful in understanding this. Our industry survey around voice of industry, this is a field work that's just come back last month. And a number of the questions inside of this are pertinent to that topic. How do we handle costs and what decisions are we making? We found this action of accepting a lower margin and trying to cushion the impact was quite widespread, and also tactically increasing some of the prices rather than a generic across the board price action. That's also been common. We see this combination, particularly in products that have had booming time periods inside of the COVID crisis. Decision makers have been faced with this difficult trade-off of market share as the priority, full factories as the priority, or passing costs on immediately. And industry-wide, this looks like it's been a large balancing act for DIY and for gardening, and it's been going on during our booming period. One other data point jumped out from the questions that we're asking in terms of actions taken, and this was around the investment in private label. If we have these price increases coming through and people have been investing in private label, that's increasing the risk of substitution. And that was something that jumped out particularly around the responses in Latin America and the responses in Middle East and Africa. Stock shortages. So we can see where this started to become a problem. We can see where 90% availability started to become a dream and started to become something that we're aspiring towards and getting back to. And we can see the progress during the first part of 2022, but we can also see gaps, and we can see it's not back to where we were before the crisis. We've still got problems sat inside of here, particularly the 80 to 90% block is larger than it should be. I looked also at gardening. The numbers are not big enough on the responses to break that out in as much detail. The view is harsher than this one and shows less of a recovery pattern in 2022. When it comes to expectations over where this is heading, 30% of the people we were asking think that this particular challenge is in hand, and by the end of this year, they will have a solution, or they already sat on their solution and everything's returning to normal. 40% of the people we were talking to think that they can see the solution, they can see how it's going to be solved. It's not real yet, but they've got solutions that are in the works, and by the end of next year, this is going to be solved. And when we look into the further future, about 30% don't yet see the end, and they don't know how it's going to be solved, and there's no solution in place that will yet provide a fix for this in that longer period of time. And that sentiment of not being able to see how and when the fix is coming, that's strongest in Europe. As you would expect, this has been a great upset around the upheaval factors from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The sentiment that things are settling down and everything's starting to become controlled and the supply chain issues are becoming resolved, that comes across most strongly in the responses from Asia. Moving on to shifting home owner priorities and psychology. There's a couple of data sets to share on this. We held a higher priority on household spend during the pandemic, but it's worth checking, is it slipping? And if it is slipping, where is it slipping? Many of the drivers that boosted DIY's priority in household spend are still active. We can still see them in the underlying data. Time at home is one of the big factors that created impulse. It created the idea around proximity to dissatisfaction. We got to see things which we didn't like around the home. The more time we spend in it, it creates that pressure. And as we can see looking at Google's mobility data around time at home, it's actually heading upwards, and that's in multiple parts of the world. That we can also see parts of the drivers for this. So this is looking at COVID cases inside of a set population in order to provide like-for-like comparisons. And you can see where Omicron's kicked in. This is part of the driver for ongoing disruption. These things are driving cocooning. It's driving the home as sanctuary psychology still. And we can also see we've had a strong housing market in the first half of this year. There are warning signs from July, but this is following a strong first half. So the DIY drivers that created this pressure for growth, they're still there. But as Michael was detailing earlier with his detail from Deloitte, these drivers now face stronger headwinds on the macroeconomic side. And in some cases, we can see they are starting to lose. How are we faring in the most recent data? This is actually June. I know it says Q2, but this is June. It is worth getting into the sales in Europe and Asia. All the other regions are so far flat. DIY and gardening are standing up, and they're also in line with total retail spending. Where it is worth highlighting, gardening is looking quite positive globally. It's holding up versus total retail, and it's faring better than DIY. We are seeing a drop across the board in Europe, but that's still in line with total tool spending. Total retail spending. We retain the same priority inside of household spend as we did during the height of 2021. And we're just being hit by the general suppression of the total economy. The fate of Europe's economy will be our fate as well. It's different when we look at China and Japan. Spending on home upgrades has fallen, and it's fallen worse than total spending. Total spending's actually been standing up okay. And this is taking spend on home improvement in that part of the world back to 2019 levels. And what we're seeing is this is also harming furniture. It's also harming homewares. Gardening seems to be sticking okay, but we have lost ground on DIY in that part of the world. There's a crack that has appeared in urbanization. I'm not saying urbanization is over. I'm not saying that it's going to change direction completely, but there is a course correction in speed and there is a crack, and it appears that parts of gardening have been flourishing inside of that crack. So we've seen the mega trend stumble. And even if it's only for a moment, it's the first stumble that we've seen in 100 years. We can see sentiment rising, particularly in the larger cities, around seeking more living space and around seeking better air quality. Those are the big drivers. And it's evident in the net migration away from cities that we saw during 2020 and 2021. It's also evident in the spending on multifunctional living spaces. When we see space conversion projects, it's also evident in the gardening data. And one of the growing opportunity areas long term. Where people can move, we see their expression of this in the migration numbers away from the city. But when they can't, they still go seeking nature. And people are bringing nature inside their homes if they can't go out and actually move into a better experience of nature. We can see Grow Your Own, and that's more popular than ever. It's even popular in the inner cities, and we can see it in product choices. We can see it in search behaviors. We can see it in book purchases. We can see it in allotment demand. So the boom in vertical pots and planters rather than the horizontal spread plants, all of this is showing a very big growth, not just around plants and flowers, but around vegetables and fruit. The other aspect that we're seeing is this indoor plant boom, and that was the single biggest opportunity area change in the long-term forecast for gardening. And it's centered around China. It's that now the single largest block of growth in actual terms, looking 5 years out. But this is also registering as increasingly attractive in Brazil, in India, after the latest research results. I want to get in and talk about the practicality side of sustainability. We've conducted an analysis of industry communications. This is getting into some of the new technology that's possible and deploying that to see new ways of measuring the world. This was around natural language processing tools, and it's looking at some metrics for the size of the communication, what's going on inside of it, and what type of communications are being broadcast. I'm not going to spend any time suggesting sustainability is a high priority topic. We're all sold on that. And from what I can actually see in the data, the DIY sector is already quite substantially into its journey. Particularly, I can see our conversation around scope 3 is higher and of a more advanced level than we're seeing in some of the parallel industries also serving the home. And the type of inputs that decision makers need has matured, and it's getting quite specific. So the analysis of communications, this is looking at all communication types across the public domain. And what we find is about 7% of all communications now mention climate neutral or climate positive policies or strategies. That's doubling since 2020. About 5% get specific, getting into the 3 tiers. And we can see the same sort of scale for circularity. Again, that's appearing in about 5% of communications. Only 0.8% of communications commit any form of year to a promise. So 12% of the documents that actually contain a policy or something around climate neutral, climate positive are actually then going on to commit a timeframe. Making promises 8 years ahead. This is about ambition and expectations of building influence. So we can see a leader in furniture, we can see a leader in tools. AkzoNobel mentioned their target in the same sort of space, actually more ambitious still. And this is around the fact that we are being amongst the more ambitious for our target setting. One of the issues we can see is the gap in the dialogue between different parts of industry and the codependence that's inherent inside of this topic. The closer we are to serving the home, the closer we are to consumers, the more agile our operations tend to be, and the more our future's tied to leading the change, driving the change, or at least not standing out as being the worst runner in this race for the change. And that pushes our side of the world towards 2025, 2030 deadlines. and the longer term is small and shrinking in our set of targets. When we look at the other side of the scale in energy or mining or heavy industry or transport, the few who have committed are actually talking more about 2040 to 2050. And this is feasibility driven. We're counting on technology innovations that don't exist yet to get us to these solutions. The codependent part of the upstream targets is evident, and this is part of the same messages that we were hearing earlier inside of the sustainability chat. The degree of influence that's implied here, the degree of needing to pull people along on the same journey that is at a pace we need to go at, that's the part that's beginning to become clear inside of it. The implication of the need for minimum standards, a cohesive industry-wide plan, but not contravening competition rules. Getting together in a room and discussing this is something that actually needs government involvement, because it's needed for us to achieve these objectives, but some of the rules and some of the things that we need to navigate here are things that government actually don't want us to do. And so we need to actually address and get into that conversation and figure out how to have these standards, how to have a common conversation. The other 30% of impacting scope 3 is around affecting in-home use and product end of life particularly. It's where the great depth sits, and that takes us into circularity. I want to touch on the DIY dilemma in circularity. I'm overrunning, so I'm going to need to speed up a bit here. I'm just going to jump through this animation. When we control the waste level inside of a factory, we own it, we can avoid contamination. This is mature, this is in hand. We're getting to an efficient level of recovery. When it goes into the home, we lose that control, and it's down to the user and what the user's doing. So this is the 10% of paint left in a pot after the job's finished. And we've got programs, Paint Care's making inroads, there are other programs that are making inroads, but it's early stages, and that's the part that we're currently addressing and talking about. But this is the common part for DIY. The bit of the product that ends up doing exactly what it was supposed to do, it's ended up on the wall. And that's the part of the conversation where 90% of the product for the loop is escaping. And how do we recover that? How do we get into fixing that? This is the big dilemma. This is touching into things like bonding agents, adhesives, sealants, nails, fixers, anything that performs the core DIY mission of fixing one substance to another, one surface to another. We need it to do that as firmly and permanently as possible, but then we need it to come apart on command. At the moment, we need it to then be cheap and easy to gain the residual value from those materials and recover it. Waiting for the clicker. There we go. So for products like tools, there are models in industries like appliances where there are examples of economic teardowns, access instead of ownership. There are circularity models in subscriptions because you get to realize that value most cleanly when you continue to own the product throughout its life. So this is getting into subscription model, shared economy. From the wider sector, this quote from Genbig hits home. This is from the store tours that were part of the Copenhagen event. Closing the loop for us means overhauling our business model. And it's this idea of designing for deconstruction, which is in the long term, the only way we're going to solve closing that loop. My parting thoughts, I'm going to speed through this a little bit. So, new shell homes in China need more finishing when the owner takes them on. And that final stage is about plumbing, it's electrics, it's refurbishment, it's decoration. Major stress point for the consumers. This is particular to that region. Hire began offering a holistic service, both of finishing these apartments, but they've then subsequently gotten into upgrades for existing homes. And this one's worth flagging because we've seen Hire go through this pattern of change before. And if they follow that previous pattern, they're going to be offering DIY products and services in Europe and the US within the next year or so. Beyond the incremental value, they've got motives around getting their appliances in to the design at the first stage. They've also got motives in data. They're gaining product experience through their partners, and they're also building scalable marketplace platforms for products and services inside of this sector. Haier have begun to expand their products already, and this is now getting into bathroom and particularly some of the sinks, faucets, toilets, showers. This is the direction they're heading into now. And that brings a consumer appliances brand into direct competition with a brand like Kohler. We saw Kohler at the CES event for electronics, but how soon are we going to see Haier at the next bathroom show? So this is the direction, and Haier are what we call a disruptor. It means to us that they don't actually assume limits inside of their operation. They test. They don't assume a right to play. They test a right to play. And we've seen this go through the pattern. This was the fabric care system. They start with a core and then they expand. And the expansion is around selling or monetizing everything inside of the system. And they managed to do that expansion in about 12 to 24 months. And in the second year, that's when they begin to export it to other parts of the world. That thinking takes us back into circularity. If you are in your silo and you're thinking how to solve that 90% and close the loop, that's very difficult. But if you have the person who's refurbishing the house in your partnership, you then have the ability to train them and teach them. Can you feed them solvents that actually help you get paint off a wall? Can you teach them how to actually deconstruct your specific product, your specific chemistry? And is that helpful for recovery of your product? The previous example is actually starting to find a presence in reality. And we see the link between DIY retail and this idea of sorting waste and recovery of waste is starting to link up far more closely. And I do have one last thought. I'm not going to labor this one. Due to the many moments of getting burned since March 2020, we've lost faith in just in time. We've lost faith in the decades of tests in the value chain, shaving 0.3 points here in product, 0.5 points in shipping, 0.9 points in stock holding, and on and on. Many, many experiments that got us to the point of efficiency. And we've cut so close to the bone, it's left us vulnerable to all of these shocks. We're now in the age of just in case, rather than just in time. We've got more layers of safety, more due diligence, more suppliers vetted and invested in, and therefore more layers of cost. And it goes back to the old joke about traffic jams. We're never in a traffic jam, we're part of that traffic jam. And so it is so far with inflation. I can't promise when the change to what comes next is going to happen, but I can give you one of the signs for how it's going to feel. The moment an idea leading to a 0.3% margin gain feels like it's worth celebrating, feels like it's worth going to a colleague and congratulating them on, that's when our lives and our decisions will have started to become blissfully and incrementally boring again. We need this to go back to being partially boring so that we can go back to actually building the balancing act between safety and between efficiency, so that we can get to the next stage, so that we can all have a new word coining this phase and we can move on and we all get to see what's coming next. That's everything from me in prepared material. Thank you very much. Apologies for the overrun. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nick, for this excellent presentation. And as Global Head of Home and Garden at Euromonitor, I'm sure that we're going to come back to you in the future. Thank you for sharing all this information with us, and I look forward to seeing you at future summits. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care. Thank you, John.
Okay, bye-bye, Nick. So, we're getting almost to the end of the sessions, 2 more sessions to go. But this is also a very special session that's coming up. Our presenter is probably one of the most well-known and probably most respected person in all of the home improvement global industry. He is very well known in his position before as the former Executive Vice President of the Home Depot. Since he left the Home Depot, he's become an international consultant, giving advice and guidance to the leading companies in Chile, in Europe, in Japan, and in Australia. He is the author of a book, The Breakthrough Retailing. From my point of view, the very best book I have ever read on retail management, and I have read many. We contacted Jim earlier this year and told him about the Global Summit and asked him if he would interview an interview partner who he thought could discuss with him the most relevant things affecting our industry today. And Jim, he chose e-commerce. So I won't say any more. I'll let Jim introduce it now. So Jim, all the way from Atlanta, welcome here today. Thank you.
And now, what is the future of e-commerce in the home improvement industry? An interview with Jim Inglis, ex-executive vice president, The Home Depot, president Inglis Retailing, and Andreas Schobert, chief technology officer, Hornbach Baumarkt AG.
Well, thank you, John, for such a kind introduction. There's no question that the role of e-commerce is a top subject in the boardroom of every retailer today. So I am very pleased to be able to conduct a conversation today with Andreas Schobert regarding the future of the e-commerce business in the home improvement industry. Andreas is the CTO of Hornbach Baumarkt AG, which operates 161 mega stores and garden centers and online stores in 9 European countries. Andreas, I was pleased to serve as an advisor to Hornbach for many years. I remember that it was your special project to initiate the Hornbach online business many years ago. I believe that Hornbach's first adventure was into e-commerce was the establishment of an online power tool workshop and or web shop. And this was clearly a pioneering effort for big box home centers at that time. Can you give us some insights into your background and your early thinking on this initiative?
Thank you, Jim, and it's really a great pleasure to talk to you today, as I've learned really so many awesome lessons from you during the last years. So thank you for being a mentor for me. And also thank you all here to listen to me for the next 6 hours. That's really exciting for me, as I'm usually not used to it, especially at home. So that brings us to our topic, home improvement. When we started working on the online store project, I'm not sure if I'm got here some different sounds actually. Okay, but is it only me that is hearing some different sound here?
Yeah, there's some words coming over the speakers that should not be coming, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, well, actually,
try again.
Yeah, again, thanks. When we started working on the online store project in 2007, it was clear. It was clear for us not to be just another online store. We wanted to strengthen our brand core, actually. So being the #1 for our DIY customers. So it was very clear for us that we didn't want to have other sales channel along the stores, but we wanted to combine the advantages of the brick and mortar store with the online businesses. Technically, it cost me a lot of nerves and the company at that time a lot of money and time also, because all our systems were not really designed for interconnected retail or e-business. It was just designed for brick and mortar businesses. But we were very lucky at the time, as our CEO at the time, Steffen Hornbach, who is also really a home improvement genius, was stubborn enough not to allow me any shortcuts on our project. And to be fair, I have to admit that the approach was also only possible because of you, Jim, as he made it very clear for us how important, for example, pricing is for our customers, even in the online business. And if we hadn't had an everyday low pricing strategy at the time, we wouldn't been able to celebrate all these successes.
Yes, I remember how many discussions we had on the pricing of e-commerce versus the pricing in the stores, and the hard decisions that had to be made at that time. You know, DIY International Magazine reported that Hornbach's 2021 online penetration represented about 17% of total sales, which is quite impressive. Do you feel that this represents a new normal for Hornbach's online business going forward?
Actually, I think so, but I would put it a little bit differently. On our perspective, we operate our business from the perspective of our customers in order to be always a relevant partner for them in their projects. So in consequence, this means not only ensuring that our offline or online business is working very excellent, but above all, the online business in combination with our brick and mortar stores have to be really perfect. So it's to stay as a relevant partner for our customers more than our competitors. And we call this interconnected retail. So we're combining the benefits of the online and the offline business. And for this work, we need three-circle excellence: online, offline, and also connecting online and offline, which is shown in the chart here. I was clicking, not this one here. So, okay, here we see the right chart. The technology is not my part, so I'm sorry for this. As you can see in the chart here, each circle needs excellence, but the beauty of the approach comes from enlarging the sweet spot in the middle by pushing the excellence of all the three circles together. This leads actually to more customers and more employee satisfaction, and this leads to more money. And the reason for is quite easy, because if you're able to reduce the costs and provide a better service to the customers at the same time, you're earning more money.
Andres, I'd like to zero in on the term you used, which was interconnected retailing. Can you give some examples of how your online and physical stores operate via an interconnected model?
Yeah, with pleasure. I'll start with my favorite example, the sale of fireplaces. Next to the power tools you mentioned before, it was the second assortment we added to the web shop. The reason was a real win-win-win situation. Before the online store, the sale of fireplaces took an average of 1 hour for the sales associates on the shop floor. The store associates had to ask the prices of the special orders by fax or email. They had paper catalogs. If they were lucky, they were up to date, otherwise outdated. They had to visual the products with tiny black and white pictures. And we don't need to mention all the other necessary merchandising missing during this process. And let's not even talk about the delivery times. It was not easy to sell, and it was for sure not easy to buy. With the online store, this changed abruptly. Great product pictures, videos, instructions, data sheets, clear prices and delivery times, cross-selling items was shown for everybody, easy to understand, as you can also see here in the chart again. For the store associates, it was some kind of a night and day difference in their job. Not only they were able to sell much more easier, but they were also able to reduce the time spent on the consultation to an average of 20 minutes instead of 60 minutes per customer, and that with a higher quality of advice. So this was one of a big eye-opener to our staff, who suddenly saw the web store not as a threat to their jobs, but to an opportunity to generate more sales in their stores. And not only that, also our customers had already been interested in fireplaces since August, but the merchandise came in the stores about September or October. So now they were able to find them right when they're looking for them. So very much from a spirit like, if you're not online, you're not offline, they were happy to find the merchandise much more easier. And for Hambach, it was also a good thing. It's not just because of a better project support for our employees and our customers. It was also generating much more sales.
Yeah, easier to sell and easier to buy. I love it. Let me ask you this. There are many articles written in business journals regarding the prediction of a retail apocalypse where online sales virtually eliminate physical stores as a primary retail format. Do you feel that such predictions have any validity in regard to the home improvement industry? And let me take that question one step further and ask if the opposite might be true, that there are cost pressures in regards to the online business that could make pure online retail business somewhat vulnerable in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Even though I cannot look into the future, my personal opinion is quite clear on that. At least in the DIY sector, physical stores have a sustainable value for the customers. This can also be seen, for example, in the factual figures since the COVID pandemic. Although the shares of the online sales in total have risen and still stay very up on a higher level than before the pandemic, we are already quite away from the peak during the store closures, for example, in Germany or in the Netherlands, for example. In other words, we could clearly see that our customers returned to the brick and mortar stores as soon as the store opened again. And at the same time, our customers learned even better during the pandemic phase that there are a lot of advantages using the online store and our Hambach app, for example, for preparing their shopping online and offline. So coming to the point of the cost pressure, yes, I can see the online business maybe much more challenging here. Especially if you think about the costs, for example, in some logistics categories for some products, that's simple math. But my perspective is that on this cost issue in our industry, we basically and currently always have cost pressure anyway, regardless whether we are talking about the brick and mortar business or the online business. So we have to find good solutions in there. And in a context of interconnected retail, our customers will finally decide whether they want to buy, in which way they want to buy. So we have to make sure that it is easy for them to buy the merchandise they want to. And probably I have there an example also. If a customer wants to buy online, but at the same time he or she is not at home because not everybody can work in home office, it's much more easier for them to collect the goods from a Hornbach store after work because we have long opening hours. And also, as you can see on this chart, we have our own pickup stations available for our customers now. And it's our own solution, and the customers really like the experience and using it even after the store hours, after the stores are closed.
Well, that is certainly a great example of increasing customer service. You know, we know that a lot of products are sold online today, but what about services? Here in America, we see a lot of competition for in-home services being brokered online between service providers and customers wishing a specific service. Is this a trend in Europe? And what services would you expect to see retailers performing online in the future?
Absolutely. The range of services has grown a lot at this time. Yeah. In addition to the delivery services, also online advice and workshop services play an important role for us. If you think about the access of the services, it always starts online. Yeah. For example, here, by making an appointment for online consulting. What we can see here as a result of the experience gained during the pandemic, it's now almost a natural matter for our customers to plan and purchase, for example, their kitchens or bathroom completely online if required. So from my point of view, we really have great opportunities in this environment using the power of the stores and connected to the online features we are offering.
Great service is certainly the key to selling projects. And of course, that's what our whole business is about, is selling projects. I remember in the early days of Hornbach's evaluation of the e-commerce business, you came here to the US to study how online sales were working with retailers like Home Depot who were using this new technology. And I recall at the time, there was a lot of confusion at the store level regarding something as simple as making a product return. Now, many years later, returns are still a vexing problem for the online business. My question is, what other obstacles are yet to be overcome to fully maximize both online and offline sales in the home improvement stores?
Yeah. There are a variety of issues actually, but there are also a variety of opportunities for our company to make it easier for our customers and also for our salespeople. Let's start with the returns in the store. Here we work. Here we start working. Here it starts already with the web store, because if the items descriptions, the images, and the videos are not available in a good quality, this automatically leads to an increase in returns in the stores as well. And in the store itself, we have to design the process and the systems in a way that a return is easy to handle for both the customers and also the store associates. And with a good customer experience at this point, changing from online to offline and again back, there's a great opportunity for a new purchase for our company. If not in the moment in the store, then at least later in time, offline or online, because the customer will remember this moment of truth in the customer relationship. And from a technical point of view, technology plays, of course, an important role. One more example, during the first phase of the pandemic, we built a number of self-service features that allowed our customers to cancel online orders more easily, and the return itself was also simplified in the stores. This had a massive reduction of number and calls to our call centers. And in turn, it led to a better customer experience. So the better we manage the system to make the system interconnected, just like our processes, the higher the positive impact on sales will be, regardless whether it's online or offline. And by far the greatest challenge, however, is to constantly communicate to our people that there is only one Hornbach company from our customers' perspective. So if something is going wrong online, this has the same impact on the stores and the other way around. If a customer was served in an unfriendly manner, for example, at the brick and mortar store, this will also have an impact on our customers, for example, via the feedback on Google. And at the same time, the online store enables our staff again on the floor to provide so much more project experience to the customers. In combination, just think of the online store with the fireplaces. There's a lot of potential here in all the issues, making their chances for our business.
Once again, we focus on projects, which are so important. The biggest news in our industry recently has been the implementation of online marketplaces by brick and mortar retailers. B&Q, for example, would be a good example of a company using online marketplace, while Home Depot has product fulfilled by its vendors using what would be called a drop ship program. How do you see the pros and cons of these two different approaches in terms of providing the long tail of e-commerce to the ultimate consumer?
Yeah, I think both variants have their charm. From my point of view, we'll need both of them in the future. At Hornbach, we already operate dropshipping very successfully. And the advantages from my point of view are that we have a better control over the processes and the handling. So we can influence the handling and also the branding of the packaging, for example. And we are still the partner to speak for our customers. The central disadvantage of dropshipping is the limitation to already existing product categories, of course. What speaks in favor to the marketplace concept is, above all the opportunities, is to expand the product range much more rapidly in areas where Hornbach is not an expert so far. And this is linked to the opportunity of benefiting from innovations at an earlier stage, because there we have to build up our own expertise at the moment. But there's one very important issue. Customer relations would always become more difficult, because let's be honest, if there's a problem with the marketplace seller, who do you would like to turn to as a customer? Then to say to the customer, yeah, dear customer, it's none of my business, turn to the marketplace partner. This is certainly not helpful for a good customer relationship. So in other words, I think both variants are very important in both variants, it's very important to ensure that HORNBACH's core brand values are retained. It must be very clear that we stand for the number one for home and gardening projects, no matter if it's product bought on the marketplace or bought on the drop shipping area. We have to make sure that we are the one who is the right man and company to take care for our customers. And personally, I see in this case much more opportunities than risks in expanding our on webshop business to include dropshipping and marketplace business, but only on the condition that we succeed in fulfilling the brand promise as number one for projects. I think the question will be, would this then still be a true marketplace business or more some kind of a highly curated version of a marketplace now?
Yes, certainly there is an opportunity and a danger, and there has to be some real thought in that balance and some real soul searching in how to bring that balance into place. We saw how the attitude. Well, we'll try again. We saw how the attitude of local governments were very important during the COVID crisis regarding declaring home improvement stores as an essential business. Do you see potential government rules or regulations that might significantly impact online sales going forward? Specifically, are there ESG issues, environmental, social, government issues that are likely to impact the e-commerce industry?
Yes, there's certainly some government initiatives that will influence our business. For example, there are many regulations on the subject of data protection or the Supply Chain Compliance Act. And all these topics usually lead to much higher costs and in terms of technical or process-related implementation. At the same time, these initiatives also offer many opportunities. One example is the data protection. Our philosophy as a company was always only to collect the personal data we need for a customer transaction and not to use it for aggressive promotional stalking the customer. Not to be misunderstood, of course, we are really interested in as much information about our customers as possible so that we could provide a better service for our customers. But I have one example that shows it quite good. I hope the charts are working right now. Yeah, here we see. One example is our fair price feature, which we only offer through our customer account. This feature makes it possible for the customer to buy their products, and within 30 days, if you have to lower the price, the customer directly gets the difference on his account, so he could use the money again for the next shopping. So there's a big trust in our pricing, and on the other hand, the customer is easy to use the money again for shopping at HORNBACH again. Also, when it comes to ESG issues, we have a strong interest in making the right decisions here for our customers, employees, and of course the society we are working in. And we all prefer to live in a better world than we are living today. But to achieve this, we have to do something that includes asking ourselves what contribution we can make without first having any legal requirements. At the end, if you want so become the world a better place, it starts with you and me, Jim. Sorry.
Well, you know, it looks like we are about to run out of time, so I'm going to just ask you one more question.
Absolutely.
And that is, I'd like you to take out a crystal ball and look at 5 years into the future and see what is the status quo of the online business for general merchandise, and how might that vary from the status of online business for home improvement products? Are there elements in the home improvement business that would suggest a different growth pattern from general merchandise? To be even more specific, what do you believe the role of Amazon or similar pure online retailers will play in the home improvement category?
Well, I think pure online retailers continue to play a very relevant role for the customers in the future. Especially as big players like Amazon have a huge access to the customer. The question that arises from my point of view is what role the topics play, like smart home, building information modeling, the automation and digitization of the customer relationship. What kind of impact will they have on our business? And how do we succeed to stay a relevant platform for DIY projects? For example, for many commodity products, the main focus is on supply and price. In case of doubt, a digital agent can organize this accordingly to my specifications much more efficiently and effectively than I can. On the other hand, in the project business, things look somewhat a little bit different. Here, I think interconnected retailers like us have having a very big advantage over the pure online players. And in the end of the day, I think it's about giving our customers good reasons why it is worthwhile to do business with us instead of other companies. Because no matter what we're doing, the most important thing is to put the customers and our employees first if you're having a physical and a virtual relationship to them.
You know, Andreas, you're right. The bottom line for success in today's retail world is customer experience. Thank you so much for providing us with your insight into the continuing evolution of e-commerce in the home improvement industry. Now let's go back to John Herbert. Perhaps there are some questions that he would like to ask you.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jim, thank you very much indeed. And I can learn a lot from you asking the right questions, which really interested everybody. And also, Andreas, thank you very much for these answers, which I'm sure will interest a lot of people watching this today. I don't think we have got time now for questions, except to say that this was a very important part of our webinar today. And I'd like to thank you very much indeed for joining us. For you, Andreas, thank you very much. I like your shirt. It's super. That's the Hornbach shirt. And Jim, thank you very much as always. You never disappoint. Thank you very much indeed. And now enjoy a lovely breakfast in Atlanta. Thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome, John.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye. So we are now coming to our final presentation today. He is a professor of transformational leadership, and he spoke 6 years ago at our Congress in Stockholm. And never, ever have our delegates given anybody a higher rating for what he said when he was there. He is one of the most influential HR thinkers. His book on leadership has been translated in 11 languages. Please welcome Chris Roebuck.
And now, overcoming uncertainty to beat the Great Resignation. Optimize hybrid and deliver success in 3 simple steps. With Chris Roebuck, international speaker and advisor.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who is here at the summit. You have heard some amazing ideas this morning about how you can take your business forward, the real leading edge of the industry. The only issue is that you have 2 challenges. The first challenge is that you have to inspire other people to make it happen. back in your organization. But not only that, you also have uncertainty, and uncertainty has got significantly bigger. We've had COVID. 3 years ago, the world was peaceful. Suddenly, COVID interrupted us without warning. The speed and depth of what COVID did was the greatest impact on society, on business, perhaps since the Second World War. We all experienced it. In just a few weeks, the world was turned upside down. That tragedy then had an impact on every single one of us. I know that every single one of you listening had perhaps a life-changing experience during that period. Not only were we locked in and locked down, but also some of us had to wrestle with hybrid working. And that didn't always go well. How do you make hybrid work with everything else that's going on? How do you keep in touch with the organization? Other people, essential workers, had to carry on regardless of the risk, and other people were furloughed. It was a massive transition that changed our lives. And as a result of that, what happened? The Great Resignation. As COVID eased, people basically said, that's it. I've had enough. I am out of this. And they just walked. Now, the question then is, what is happening now? We have a potential recession building up in various places in the world. Not only do we have the recession, but we have the cost of living. That means that people have less disposable income to spend on your products. We potentially have supply chain issues. We have food issues. All of this means that the uncertainty is just constantly building more and more. What does that mean? That means that people have effectively had enough. They are exhausted. Uncertainty is now bigger. It is now more serious. It is impacting more, and it is coming from more and more places. So, not unsurprisingly, perhaps some of you have felt like this in the last month, in the last week, perhaps even in the last day. So many people, because of uncertainty, because of what we've experienced over the last 3 years, are now feeling like this. And I know everybody who is listening to this will have felt like this at some point in time. My objective today is to transform your experience, to enable you to take the ideas that you have got from this amazing morning and go back to the organization and make them happen. Because people back there aren't inspired because they weren't here. You have to inspire them to make these ideas happen. And you also have to do it within that environment of greater uncertainty. So what my objective is for you today is to transform that into that, so that you can ride the wave of uncertainty, so that you can get through it, you can manage it, and you can succeed despite it. COVID transformed our lives. This is what we need to understand to be able to negotiate uncertainty. We're human. Our experiences create our perceptions of life, and COVID was an experience, a devastating experience, and our perceptions change our behavior. We respond based on those perceptions. And if COVID was anything, COVID was without doubt the great reprioritization of what we all feel is important in our lives, not just in our work, but in our personal lives, our home, our family, our destinies. That is why perspectives have changed. That is why the Great Resignation happened and still happens, because people want more. Why did people leave? That's the question. The answers are really consistent. People resigned because they didn't think their leaders cared. They didn't feel valued by their boss. They didn't feel valued by their organization. They were given too much work. They weren't being developed. The work wasn't meaningful. And they weren't given flexibility to do that work in a way that they wanted to do it. Those are the reasons why the Great Resignation happened, because people, after the COVID experience, wanted those things, from their work, and they just weren't getting them. And I know there are some of you out there who have left, have moved on. I know that there are those of you out there who are thinking these things. And for all of you leaders out there, these are the things that you need to concentrate on. Yes, these things aren't new. They were happening before COVID, but COVID ramped them up significantly. And to get things done, to beat uncertainty, we have to address these things. But there has also been another change. In the good old days, people would not leave generally unless they had a job to go to. Now that world has also changed. 64% of people are prepared to leave, even if they don't have a job to go to. That means they can leave extremely quickly if something happens they're not happy with. And for those who aren't ready to leave, who don't feel that they can leave, what's happening there? They become disengaged. They quietly quit, waiting for that perfect moment to walk out the door. There is now a quiet quitting iceberg in organizations. Yes, those that leave, we see, we know they leave. It's obvious they're not there anymore. But beneath the surface is the biggest danger. There are people who are not engaged, so basically doing the minimum. Amongst those are the quiet quitters who are just waiting for that perfect moment to leave. That could be up to 70% of people in an organization. That's a frightening figure, but it's true. And we need to address that, because if we don't address that, we can't manage uncertainty. There is, in my view, an employee engagement emergency that we are facing at the moment in our organizations. Quite simply that. What does employee engagement mean? It means that people give us their best. Now, employee engagement went up from 2010 to 2020. It almost doubled to 21%, but it's now dropped because people post-COVID are expecting more. You're expecting more. I'm expecting more. Everyone's expecting more. And we have to deliver on those expectations. Currently, the best employee engagement figures are in the States and Canada at 33%. Europe is averaging around 15%, as are most other regions. But if you look at those figures, you ask yourself the question, well, hang on, if those people are engaged, that's only a certain percentage of the organization. What's going on with everybody else? And that is the time bomb that we have to address to get things done and beat uncertainty. Because of the other people, the time bomb, 60 to 70% are not engaged, i.e. just doing the job. 10 to 20% are disengaged. What does that mean? That means they are proactively not doing the job. They are negatively impacting on everybody else around them. And the frightening figure is that you need 4 people who are engaged to counteract the impact of one person who is disengaged. So it doesn't impact team performance. Think about the maths on that one. So there is a solution. It is accelerating the quality of leadership in your organizations, accelerating your own quality of leadership as a leader, as C-suite, accelerating the quality of your leadership and everybody else in your organization. And you can do it in 3 simple steps that will allow you to put in place the things that you've seen at this summit, to put in place what needs to be done, and to manage uncertainty. It's about growth. It's about individual growth. It's about team growth. It's about organizational growth. It's about growth for us as human beings, not just in work, but out of work. Growth in our lives, which creates happy organizations, and that creates better societies for us all. The first step is what I call the firm foundation. This is a fundamental to get anything else done effectively. It is those basic task management skills that we all should have in place to be successful. We can get things done if they're not in place, but they're not being done optimally. That is a simple fact. What are these? Quite simply, prioritization. Are we doing the things that support strategic objectives, or are we doing just stuff? Are we managing time effectively so we deliver on time every time? Are we as leaders delegating so we do the things only we can do and we get everybody else to do the things that they can do? That's the whole point of delegating. Are we communicating effectively so we give people clear indications of what they need to do? Why are they doing it? What's the big picture? What's in it for them? What's the purpose? To inspire them. And finally, we need to give them feedback so they know how they're doing and how they can be better. Now, let me pose you a question. The issue is that many of these aren't in place. Let's take delegation as an example. It'd be interesting. How many of you, ask yourselves, how many of you have ever been given any formalized training or development on how to delegate day to day? It's a question I ask leaders across the world. And any audience I've spoken to over the last 10 years, it's never been more than 20 to 25%. So I'm guessing that 75% of you who are listening probably haven't been formally taught how to delegate effectively. And you know what? That simple lapse could be wasting you, or you could get, if you were, half a working day a week more time to do the really important things. That's why these things are so important. Yes, you'll get the job done if these aren't in place, but you will not optimize the performance of yourself, your team, or your organization unless all your people are involved and good at this. That's the elephant in the room that organizations are not talking about. You can talk about customer focus, you can talk about strategy, you can talk about supply chains. But unless people can manage tasks well, they're never going to work optimally. Once that's in place, it's about getting the best from people, inspiring them to give you that best so you can make these new things happen, so that you can address and manage that uncertainty. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work is a beautiful quote. It absolutely epitomizes modern employee engagement. Now, who do you think said that? Was it Richard Branson? Was it Steve Jobs? Was it some other great, thoughtful business leader that we have seen at some point in time in the newspapers? This is who it was. It was Aristotle, 2,300 years ago. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. That is still true now as it was 2,300 years ago. And that's because it's not because of the job we do. It's not because of the organization we work for. It's not because of the time we live in. It's because you and I are human beings. That's why pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And that pleasure comes from our emotions, not just our rational thinking. An employee's decision to give high performance is 60% rational. Yes, we need a good plan, but it's also 40% emotional. We need to believe, we need to understand why, we need to see the purpose in what we are doing. Go back to that why people left, lack of meaningful work. It all fits together. What this means for your organizations and getting done the things you saw at this summit, getting done the things you need to get done. If you just tell people what to do, if you just tell people the plan and you don't inspire them, you are throwing away 40% of the chance of getting it done optimally. 40%. And 80% of that emotional element is delivered by your boss or you as a boss or the bosses that you have had in the past. That's why people join organizations and leave bosses, and that's why the Great Resignation happened and is still happening. So I want you to think back over your career. I want you to think to a time when you woke up and you were really motivated to go to work. You jumped out of bed, you went in to work, because when you got to work, you knew that you were going to be inspired. And why were you going to be inspired? You were going to be inspired because you had your best boss. And when you have that best boss, you delivered success because you gave your best. And what I want like you to do is I'd like you to think back over your career to that best boss. Think of that best boss that you had. And I'm sure that you can I'm sure you're thinking of them in your mind now. You can picture that person. You can picture how good it felt, how good you felt when you went to work, how good you felt when you went home because of what happened there. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think and answer this simple question. What did that best boss do on a day-to-day basis that made them special? And I want you to think about that for 30 seconds. And if you like, I'd like you potentially to type into chat what those things were that boss did on a day-to-day basis that made them so special. And let's see if we get some interesting answers. So 25 seconds to go. Just type in anything that special boss did for you. So what have we got? So, ideas around, trusted me, developed me, showed they cared. All of those simple things that you saw were things that when people lack, they leave. And it's consistent that all of those things, those really, really simple things, do make a difference to the performance of your team and your organization. Let me give you some real figures from the sort of things that you have mentioned. Just telling people how they contribute to that big picture, they can give you up to 32% more effort. Giving them fair and accurate feedback, they'll give you 39%, not 4, not 5, 39% more effort effectively. A good development plan can make them deliver 38% more effort because they're inspired about their own development. Just showing employees you care can get 26% more effort. Think about how much difference those effort increases will make in terms of getting done what needs to be done and beating uncertainty. And there's another figure I'll throw in now, because if you do these things, the amazing impact is that it will also reduce your risk of losing your best people to competitors by 87%. Now, I knew what you were going to say, because I've asked leaders around the world that question for over 10 years. And the amazing thing is I always get the same things. It doesn't matter what sector, what organization, what level, where in the world, US retail, British military, more retail in Rome, doctors in Greece, Myanmar Red Cross and Chinese space program leaders in Beijing. It's always the same list. And this is the list that leaders give me as what they have been inspired by their boss to give their best. But it's also the thing that inspires any human being to give their best. It's simple, powerful things that you know already, you're already doing. You just need to do more, to focus on those things, to create the environment where you will get delivery optimized and uncertainty managed. You can see them there. Realistic and challenging targets. Told me what was going on. Developed my skills and capabilities. Just let me get on with it and didn't interfere. Encouraged me and praised me when due, showed respect for me as a professional, backed me up when required. We all needed that at times, acted with integrity, built trust, was honest and transparent, led by example, just listened to me, just asked me for my ideas, showed they genuinely cared, didn't blame me for those genuine mistakes I made, was fair and treated me decently, supported me and knew when to do it, and inspired me with their enthusiasm. Those things are the things that will destroy the Great Resignation if you and your organization do them. And that's confirmed by all of my interviews in my podcast series with world leading leaders in top global organizations. They keep coming back to their success being driven by these actions, because they can give you up to 30% more effort from 60% of people. How much difference does that make? Significant, because what it does is It doesn't only deliver on better performance, it delivers on better customer service, slicker change and transformation in a world of uncertainty, people looking for cost efficiencies proactively, developing disruptive thinking because they want the organization to be better, better well-being for them because they love where they work. They don't want to leave, so it's better retention. And it even manages risk better because they identify risk. But above all, it can potentially put 10 to 16% on bottom line for free. So how do we take all of this marvelous effort that we're now getting, because we're doing more of those simple things, to focus on to what really delivers success for our organization? It's about that big picture. The fact that sometimes we just tell people that little picture in the corner, this is what you need to do. Don't worry about the rest of it. That's what we do as senior leaders. You just need to know about your job. That is completely counterproductive, because if people understand the big picture, what happens is they know where the organization is going. They see the big picture. The big picture inspires them. They see the purpose. They see the direction. And if things go wrong, they can then reestablish the direction. Everybody needs to know the big picture to inspire them. We also have the problem of hybrid working. Yes, okay. Only 30% can potentially hybrid work. But organizations are coming out with all sorts of weird stuff on this. No, you mustn't come into the office. No, you can't work at home. You've got to come in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. People are confused. What is the best way to optimize hybrid? It's 3 simple elements. 1, it's about strategic principles. What is the overarching thing we think as an organization? 1 day a week, 2 days a week. Then it's about, without any doubt, team tailoring at team level in terms of what the team needs from the individual. Do they do collaborative working? Do they do individual working? How much of each? And how often do we need to do each of those? And how much individual support do people need when they're working remotely? Because one of the main problems of remote work during COVID was that leadership support was lacking. Where it wasn't lacking, performance on, in particular, individual working increased significantly. So again, we need to pull people together to beat the other challenge of hybrid. You in C-suite can make a real difference on this, as well as all leaders doing those simple actions. This is my staircase to success for senior leaders. If senior leaders do simple things like care about people, develop people, communicate effectively, you will get additional effort over and above what everybody else is doing. Look at that, 29% extra effort if C-suite champion effective and authentic communication. So that's a double whammy. Leaders across the organization inspiring their people to give the best, and then C-suite adding on top of that by their example. So what's the key transformation all of this will enable for you, your team, and the wider organization? It is so simple and so powerful. It is this: everybody in your organization now genuinely cares about delivering success. And that is possible because you all know Gary Ridge of WD-40, who you've seen speak. Gary has 93% employee engagement because he has done all of these things that I have set out for you this morning. Gary and WD-40 prove that it works. What are the benefits? You can get 20% more done on strategic deliverables through alignment. You can get an extra half day a week, extra time for leaders through better delegation. You can get 30% more effort from 60% of people through leaders inspiring. You can get 30% more performance by breaking down silos using the big picture. And you can get that 10% increase on bottom line, potentially, depending on your business model, and all of those other benefits I set out. And all of it with virtually no financial investment. How easy is it? You're using things that everybody know already, things that you know, things that your team knows, because you're already doing them. You just need to focus on the ones that really hit the return on investment spot. You'll also unleash that 40% extra emotional power and take everything up a gear because it's already there. And in addition to that, it works everywhere. Why? Because we're all human. It's that simple. And it's rapid in implementation and return on investment. So why is it so powerful? It's so powerful because we as human beings in our organizations and in our teams, when we stand together, when we focus on the same objective of implementing the ideas you've seen here today, of doing what needs to be done, of dealing with the challenges of uncertainty as they hit us, when we work together as a team focused on the same objectives, we are unbeatable. And that's because we create a we, not me culture where everybody, you, me, all of the people around us want to give our best. And it's then we reach the pinnacle. It's then that we can reach that new dawn of super performance in our organizations to get done everything we want to get done, to beat uncertainty. Because if we proactively accelerate our leadership, we will deliver peak performance. We will manage uncertainty effectively and mitigate it. And we will discover opportunities for success we have never seen before. So please take the ideas that you have seen at the summit today, those great ideas, take them back to your organization, inspire people, get them all behind you, make it an organization for true success. And good luck in making it happen.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. I think I'm getting goose pimples. You've really inspired us today with your speech, as always. It's so nice to see the energy is still there and the message that you bring across. I'm sure people all over the world who've watched this presentation today will find benefit. I'm sure we haven't seen each other for the last...
Go and do it. Go and do it, everybody.
I do it every day. Well, I try to do it every day. But Chris, thanks a lot. Lovely to see you've got so much energy left, and we look forward to seeing you again at one of our Global DIY Summits. It certainly helps our program. All the very best for the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, we have now had all our 6 presentations, and we're coming to the end of the second Global DIY Summit. But I would like to call our general manager to say a few words. Iñaki Maillard, he is I call him the genius behind these programs that he brings up in the organization. So please welcome Iñaki Maillard.
And now, farewell wrap-up by John W. Herbert, General Secretary of EDRA GIN, and Iñaki Maillard, General Manager, Global DIY Summit.
Well, Iñaki, well done again for bringing this program. I think we've had some excellent speakers today. Certainly all 6, I believe. We've learnt a lot, we've seen a lot, and this is thanks to your organization. So how did you find it?
John, I think it was an excellent second Virtual DIY Summit. We talked about inflation. We talked about supply chain disruptions. We talked also about energy shortages and how they are going to impact in the home improvement industry. And probably we talk about the most important topic nowadays, that is sustainability. So I think we covered all the topics that we should cover at the moment. And as General Manager of the Global DIY Summit, I'm very happy to announce that we are going to release today the DIY Legacy Project Trend Report, where we are going to show best practices from our companies, from our industry, and also to inspire other companies to go in this direction of innovating towards sustainability. So I would say it was a very, very successful second Virtual DIY Summit. And of course, I'm very glad to announce that over 700 people joined the event, More than 50 countries are represented. And of course, all the people that are going to watch this event on demand. I'm really excited to see the thousands and thousands of people that are going to watch this event in the next days.
Well, I think it's fair to say, Iñaki, that our experience is that people who stream it rather than watch it are sometimes 3 times as high as the people that watch it live. And I think the content of what we heard in these presentations was so valuable that I certainly will also stream these later to find out. I won't mention one because I think they were all very, very interesting. So, but the main thing is that our audience at home, I think that wherever you are in the world today, watching this webinar, being part of the home improvement community, it's most important for us that you enjoyed it, you found it worthwhile, and we look forward to welcoming you. Yes. But, well, maybe you can just announce.
John, I also only would like to thank all our team, because without them it would be impossible to organize this. I would like to thank Stefan, Karina, Oliver and Shihan. Without them, it would be impossible. And they also need a lot of recognition because we achieved this quality because of them. I also would like to thank our board of directors. I would like to thank Reinhard Wolf, Sergio Giroldi, Pete de Koning, because without their support, really, in these uncertain times, it would be very, very difficult to organize this. And also, John, I would like to thank you personally, because in the last days, you have shown me that you are not only a great boss, but a very good friend to me. And I have learned from you to put the person before business. And this is something I get from you. You always told us to build win-win relationships, because in the end, the only thing that lasts is the relationship that we have with others. And we have to make sure to have the best relationship possible with our customers and with our partners, with the people near us. And this is something I learned from you. I want to thank you because I'm very, very glad that it's been an honor that I shared this journey together with you for the past 11 years. And I want to tell you how grateful I am that we shared this moment together.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Iñaki. It's very, very kind of you, very kind words to thank me. I would just like to conclude by thanking the technical team here. I know I've come a long way to do it. It's not easy doing a global conference with people coming from Peru in South America to New Zealand on the other side. But I think all in all, it's worked very, very well indeed. So to all of you, thank you very much. Have a great day. Look forward to seeing you at the next Global DIY Summit, which will be held in Berlin next year in June. So from us here in the studios of Cologne in Germany, goodbye and thank you.
You said I was a piece of art. You decided to paint my heart, but you colored it gray, then you put it in a frame, hung it beside other house gray as mine. Oh, I should have known, should have let you go. Oh, I should have known, should have let you go. Oh, I should have known, should have let you go. But I wanted to fall in love so bad, like in the movies or the dreams. You're like in the movies or the dreams. You wanted to tear down my walls. You did that by sweet talking. You got inside my mind. Now I'm wide awake at night. Put me aside. I wasn't worth your time. Oh, I should have known. Should have let you go. Oh, I should have known. Should have let you go. Oh, I should have known. Should have let you go. But I wanted to fall in love so bad, like in the movies or the dreams. You're like in the movies or the dreams. should've let you go.